All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 3rd, 2024 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. And first up on our agenda today has to do with minimum density and multifamily permits. Brad is coming up to get us started.
Good morning. Yes, so we have a tag team effort on this first item on your agenda today. I'm going to introduce a few slides. Amber's going to come up, talk more in detail about the multifamily piece of it, and then I'll come back up and talk about the SDC. So we kind of have a tag team on this one. The summary, there's really three kind of overall topics on this one: minimum density provisions in the development code, and arguments to retain, amend. Actually, we didn't put that on there, but the Home Builders Association also submitted an email that should have been put on your dais today, and they actually argue for a repeal on some level, but a pretty significant amendment. So we can talk more about that as the council would like. The second would just be kind of a general overview of the multifamily residential units and codes, and then alternatives and other municipality examples of incentivizing multifamily. There's three council goals that these topics relate to there on the bottom. So just a little bit of background. October 2nd, 2023, you had a pretty substantial discussion about this topic. Home Builders Association and the Housing Advisory Committee both spoke at that meeting, and they presented a couple of different perspectives on the minimum density ordinance, which was adopted by the council on April 25th of 2022 on a 5-3 vote. Home Builders Association has proposed a full repeal of the minimum density ordinance and in place incentivize higher density development through public infrastructure, SDC reductions, things like that. The Housing Advisory Committee supported minimum density ordinance. They did present 4 ideas at that October meeting to incentivize higher density development, and SDCs was one of those, and we'll be talking more about that later. So a couple of the main outcomes of that workshop: the full repeal of the minimum density was not supported by the full council. However, a majority of councilors did speak up in support of some kind of increased incentives for multifamily residential. And then there was some support for additional exceptions being added to the minimum density code. And since October, home builders and others continue to request a reconsideration of this topic, so I think that's in part how it has kind of come back to you. Really quickly, I think you're all probably pretty familiar, but these just to refresh you in terms of what actually is the code saying today about minimum density, and since we're going to be talking quite a bit about it today, we just wanted to bring it back to you. It does only apply to 2 zones, only the R3 and the R4. If you build new today, you have to meet a minimum of 60% of what the maximum density is. So the R3 has a maximum density of around 10. The R4 has a higher density. You have to achieve 60% of that when you come in with your project, or phase your project and show how you're going to meet that over time. Non-conforming sites, you can't move further out of compliance if you already have a situation, but you can add units if you're going to show how you can reach that. If you do a land division in one of these 2 zones today, you do have to demonstrate how you meet the minimum density. And then in terms of exceptions, and this was one of the topics that the council talked quite a bit about before, we were talking about what are some other exceptions that you can put in there. For example, the 10,000 square foot lot size was one that you talked quite a bit about in October. You didn't end up giving direction to change the code, but that's an example of one. So, you know, if you had a 10,000 square foot lot or less in the R3 or R4 zone, then you wouldn't have to comply with this ordinance. That being said, there are some exemptions in there already, and those include things like what are listed there, environmental constraints basically that can be subtracted out. Minimum density requirements, those R3 and R4 zones have other uses that are allowed besides residential. So this is, again, something as we talk about this today, and we're going to be throwing a lot of kind of information at you, but this is just one to keep in mind. There are several other uses that you can do in the R3 and R4 zones, so we can't just assume that 100% of the area that's currently zoned that will build out as residential. There's professional offices and schools and daycares as well. So this means the balance of the vacant or the underdeveloped land could be used from something else. We have talked in the past about the other properties that are zoned R3 and R4, and that does include the RCC campus. That's over 80 acres that has R4 zoning. Asante expansion properties, parks, and other residential uses. So when Amber comes up, she'll talk more about how those factored in. And speaking of, this is when Amber comes up, and we'll continue on with the R3 and R4 and density.
All right, good morning. So what I have here is a map of R3 and R4 zoned lots that show as underdeveloped, which is defined as $10,000 or less in improvements on the lot. I did pull out parcels held by RCC, Grants Pass School District 7, Grants Pass Parks, and the lots held by Asante immediately surrounding their current hospital. I also pulled out the parcels for Allen Creek Crossing, which is going to develop 68 units, and Nebraska Trail Apartments, which is going to develop 51 units because those are already spoken for those developments. I did note that repealing our ZTO did revert many of our lots back to lower density. So this map shows where are those lots that meet those minimum density as underdeveloped. So I did pull out some of the goals that we have. The city goal in our urbanizing area comprehensive plan is to ensure the availability of adequate numbers of needed housing units at the price ranges and rent levels commensurate with the financial capabilities of Grants Pass households and allow for flexibility of housing location, type, and density. The statewide planning goal 10 also uses the commensurate with financial capabilities language. So just to include that, where I'm going with this is kind of going to be talking about why apartments are their own category in relation to minimum density. So again, some background, our housing needs analysis in 2021 projected that the city will need to grow by 4,055 new dwellings between 2020 and 2040 to accommodate for new population growth. These dwelling units will need to be available at a variety of income levels, assuming future residents of Grants Pass have an income distribution that's the same as existing residents. About 1/3 of those new housing units will need to be for those at very low or extremely low incomes, which is below 50% of the area moderate income. In relation to that, middle housing at its lowest, as it's aged, tends to hit about 70% area moderate income and can go well above 120% when it's new. Market rate multi-unit developments, usually at its lowest, hit about that 50% of the area moderate income when they're older, and then can again go up to over 100% of the area moderate income when they're brand new. Program restricted multi-unit developments, locally, those impact the 0 to 60% of the area moderate income categories. They can go up to 80, but locally we have them at the 0 to 60. Again, in the future, they could go up to 80 as well. I have a breakdown of the share of households by income level in Grants Pass, just showing what percentages are in these low income categories, middle income categories. And again, right off the bat, you can see that a large chunk of our households are under that 60% of the area moderate income. And a good chunk of our households are under that 80 and 100% area moderate income. So just keeping those in mind. Our household tenure as of 2021 was 46% renters. So again, to keep that in mind. Now this is a breakdown of the average asking rent by building type in 2023. Our red is our apartment category, and you can see that other than the one bedroom, which came really close, it outcompetes all the other housing type categories in affordability and rent. Just throwing back to those income category breakdowns. And building type representative, our total housing stock is on the right side here, showing the 73% single-family housing, whereas the available market rate rentals in 2023, you can see that 22.8% were apartments, which only make up 9.5% of our total housing stock, and only 4.3% of that total apartments is market rate. And market rate is what was pulled in these numbers because the low-income housing pulls from their own wait list. They wouldn't have shown up in that market rate assessment. So 22% of the available rentals were being supported by 4.3% of the total housing stock. And again, that breakdown of our market rate apartments versus our program restricted affordable apartments, again, that's just 4.3% of our total housing units. This one, again, is to show that right now apartments are really the majority of what's providing for those one-bedroom unit types, whereas our total household size for total households in Grants Pass, 30% of our households are one-person households, and 34% are two-person households. So again, getting into that affordability of the availability of being able to get into a unit size that you can afford. And you can see here the red section is the apartment category, the yellow is our middle housing category, and blue is ADU. Our one bedroom is a heavy lift by the apartments. We are getting some middle housing in them. Our single family instances tend to be our older 90, 100-year-old homes, because that's when they were being built as a one bedroom. And ADUs do represent a large chunk as well. But if you looked back at this chart here, our ADUs are the second least affordable next to single-family homes. So our completed units, year comparison, this just shows what types of units have been completed in the last 3 years, with a large percentage being single unit detached. We are getting a good number of plexes. We haven't yet gotten multi-unit. However, this is as of the end of 2023. Cathedral Square, which is 54 units, completed at the beginning of this year. We also have Allen Creek Crossing, 68 units upcoming, and Nebraska Trail, 51 units upcoming. And we are working on the back end with multiple developers who've expressed strong interest and are making positive movements towards developing multi-unit developments, both at market rate and program restricted here in Grants Pass. So this section here, this is showing how many units would have been affected by minimum density in the last 3 years. Of note, 2023, we had minimum density in effect. So of course, there were no units there that would have failed minimum density. But in the previous 2 years, this orange section are ones that would not have met minimum density. It was not applicable at the time, but they were developed, so we're showing they would not have met, as opposed to the green, these would have met. In our yellow section, these are all the other units that wouldn't have had any minimum density requirements on them based on their zoning. We're also making changes and have been making changes to encourage multifamily development, but it's a long process. Early this year, we changed the open space requirements to reduce them and make them less of a barrier for multifamily developers. Last year, we removed the parking minimums. We're working currently on an increase to maximum building height limit, and we're also working on adjusting the urban renewal area funding for housing to include multifamily development at market rate levels. That one in particular is important because we have come to the understanding that one of the holdups with our local market and multifamily housing development is that it's been so long since market rate has been developed that banks are having trouble providing comps on those rent amounts. So they're having trouble loaning at appropriate amounts because they don't have anything to compare it to. So that's where the urban renewal area funding we're hoping to roll out to help get that pilot program to come through and allow banks to comp again on those. And then we're also having multi-unit property tax exemption. That's a housing production strategy that's scheduled to begin refinement in 2026. SDC ordinance highlights. In general, the city improvements, capital improvements project, oh, it's you? I was just reading it. I do have a couple other notes to throw in. So we did have in that analysis of the last 3 years, we did have projects in both R4 and R3 that were able to meet minimum density at varying levels of percentages. We had quadplexes, duplexes were able to meet those minimum densities. We had homes with ADUs that were able to meet those minimum densities. And the lowest type that I saw, we only had 2 that came up in the last 3 years that went into the R4 section, but the lowest type that came up was a 4-plex, and they met at 86% of the density percentage. And I just want to, again, reiterate that the point of all those charts was to show that market rate apartments meet a specific spot in our income brackets that middle housing doesn't quite get low enough to hit, and low-income housing doesn't quite get high enough to hit sometimes. And so it's really important to protect for the future of being able to build those units, because in order for them to age and get to that low-income level naturally occurring, we have to build them. They can't get old if they don't start getting built. Any questions on those sections, or do we just, I'll come back.
And I should have said at the beginning that this meeting doesn't really, what shall we say, it wasn't advertised as one of our every other month Home Builders Association meetings. This topic, had been sort of discussed by council quite a bit, and I think the mayor and council president have been kind of watching. There's been a lot of stuff that has happened since October when you last talked about it. That being said, we did reach out to home builders. We have Chad here today, who I know has some interest, and then the Housing Council, Doug's here today. So in terms of how you want to proceed after we're done, we just wanted to clarify that we still have, the Home Builders Association every other month going on. And this was a topic that was addressed kind of indirectly in their letters. But so just wanted to touch on that. So the last topic the council wanted to hear about was, is there any opportunity within the system development charges to use those as a form of incentive for some of the increased density type projects like apartments. And Jason can speak to some of this as well, but I'll just hit some of the background. So in general, the city capital improvement projects where SDC revenues are applied rely on usually about 20%, and that fluctuates from project to project and from whether they're talking about transportation or sewer or stormwater. But we felt like that 20% was kind of in there. So that's where the city has been. And then ORS does give, as you know, a lot of guidelines on what SDCs can be used for. They can only be used on capacity increasing improvements, so you can't use SDC on all projects. They are imposed on all development that connects to city water, sewer, stormwater, and it's also used for parks and rec and transportation. Today, they're payable at the time of the building permit, or if there's some other authorization to connect. So every once in a while you get a septic that fails and they need to hook up and they're not really doing a building permit. But for the most part, where we see SDCs today collected is at the time of that building permit. There's 2 primary forms of SDC incentives that are used around the state that we found. SDC amount, in terms of just actually reducing the amount of the SDC and not having any replacement of that. We don't see that really because of the first bullet, that we rely on SDCs pretty heavily, and so we have always wanted to identify a replacement revenue for those. The timing of when those SDCs are paid is one that you see some jurisdictions use, and we'll talk about Medford's here. The city has actually had a deferral of SDCs in its code for a long time. It's in Municipal Code 3.10. And what it says is any residential development may defer payment of SDCs from the time payment is otherwise due until an occupancy permit or close of escrow, whichever is earlier. So to qualify for this, you have to, at the time of your building permit application, pay a fee, which is essentially an interest rate that collects over the time from the building permit until it's actually paid. We've seen very little use of this, probably in part because it doesn't get a lot of advertising, but it has been in there. The other thing is because of the fee, and you are essentially paying more. So Community Development's approved only 7 of these agreements for financing AFDs or SDCs since 2021. The Muni Code states payment of these at the certificate of occupancy or close of escrow. Up to this point, we have really only seen them with escrow, and that's more of an administrative thing in terms of tracking with the title companies in town, so that there's a mechanism to track exactly when those SDCs would be due if you had a deferral agreement. So what are the options? Portland has had one for quite some time. I'm sorry, in 2023. So they've had a fairly recent one that allowed for payment to be deferred up to 24 months. If the deferral payment is approved, the failure to pay those in full for a qualifying building permit will result in accrual of interest. So that's similar to ours with a little bit more specificity on the time frame. The one that the Housing Advisory Committee and staff looked a little bit more at is Medford's. And Medford's has a situation where a single family development payment of SDCs can be deferred without interest to time of sale or time of actual occupancy. The multi-family residential development, commercial development, and industrial development payment of SDCs can be deferred at issuance of certificate of occupancy, time of sale, or time of actual occupancy, whichever's first. So a little bit more flexibility there when you're talking about the multi-family side. And there's of course going to be a lien as we do now. The city does the same thing. So the motion that was made to you on May 17th supported preparing an SDC deferral program that kind of mirrors Medford's. And again, the real benefit here is it's at the front end of your project. When you're coming in, you already have a large chunk of cash that's due to pay for the building permit and other fees. If you don't have to pay that at that point, and you can defer that and connect it more with your sale, it does offer a little bit more flexibility and latitude in terms of how that could be financed and or how the timing of it. It's difficult to say why we haven't seen our deferral used much other than, like I said, the lack of advertising for it. Medford has seemed to have experienced a little bit more success with theirs. So again, that would be deferring it and not having the fee or the interest rate accumulate. So that would be something that the council could consider. So we know we threw a lot at you. Those are kind of the options there. On the minimum density ordinance, again, you can retain as we currently have it. You could propose some amendments, direct staff to do some amendments, repeal it. And then on the council direction on the SDCs, we could retain the current Muni Code deferral, which has a fee charged, and potentially do some more advertising of that. We could amend the Muni Code to align with Medford's model or some other opportunities that come out of today's discussion.
Thank you, Brad. Council, what questions do you have? Rick, go ahead.
Thank you, Brad. Could you go back to the building type that shows the total housing stock?
Yeah, and Amber, do you want to?
That was Amber's.
You want to come up, Amber, to? He hasn't asked the question yet, but I'm pulling it up. Is it this one, Counselor?
So there was a total housing stock building type? Oh, yes, no, keep going. Keep going, that one, on the right-hand side. Do we have any figures like that for Roseburg or Medford as to what their,
The total housing stock can be pulled from the census, so I could pull them.
I don't expect
But I
that
don't have
today.
them off the top of my head, no.
But I think that'd be interesting to know, are we overloaded with family housing, or are we about the same as the rest of those cities? Do you have any idea?
I would think with Roseburg, we might be similar, but the push is generally, I mean, we're coming out of being rural, so we are on the lower end of any other type other than single-family housing.
The one that we're a little bit higher in is duplexes.
Yeah, we've
If
had
you-
really great success with the plexes since the beginning of this middle housing code.
Okay.
And duplexes are the bulk of those coming in.
And the second and last question I have, for the Housing Advisory Committee, what was their original position concerning the 60% density factor?
So the minimum density ordinance actually began with Housing Advisory Committee several years ago.
Correct.
I mean, Doug's been the chair the whole time, so he can speak to it. But they have advocated and supported for the minimum density code.
Yeah. Yes, we did. We advocated it, and I don't know if it was unanimous or not. It was a while ago. I can't remember. But we saw a couple benefits to it. One, it sort of puts those guardrails or something on the development community that says, hey, build more apartments. And also that should artificially keep the price of that land a little lower, because there's less demand for it. And it certainly is the greatest need in the community is apartments for the middle housing.
And as the committee, over time, have they still maintained that position, or do
Yeah.
they, all right,
Yeah,
thank
it
you.
hasn't changed.
Okay.
Are there other questions? Valerie?
I don't know if you can answer this question, but, one of the things that happens as you build more duplexes, triplexes, or like we've built because we do have coming down the pike the low-income housing, is people move out of the house that they were in currently. So has that opened up any more of our real estate for just in terms of other housing for, lower income people buying into houses? I mean, I'm just kind of curious because that's really how how housing works a lot of times is that
Right.
as people move into other housing, it opens up other housing. And in that case, if it's lower income or whatever, that would open up houses at a more affordable level. Have we seen that happen?
So I do my monthly rental tracking, and I definitely saw a large bump in the last 3 months. As Cathedral Square was filling, there was a large bump in one-bedroom studios and lower-cost two-bedroom units on the rental market, hitting the rental market. Now, those got snatched up quick. Those are gone already. But there was, it wasn't the total amount of units, obviously, but there was a large increase. Usually I'm seeing maybe 8 one-bedrooms at all per month, and one of those months, the middle of it, I got 20, so.
Brian and then Rob?
Thank you for the presentation. There was a lot of information in here with graphs and charts and trying to show statistics on the housing situation. And most of us up here are not planners, not in construction, not housing experts. But what I think I heard staff say is that the minimum density requirement is kind of protecting the R3 and R4 for future potential for higher density apartments and things like that. And I know that it's probably a tough topic for staff to give a recommendation on, given all the interests involved, but I just wanted to make sure that I was kind of coming to the conclusion that I think staff was trying to explain.
Yeah, Counselor, our job is to present the information to you as policymakers. We did go back and listen to a couple of the meetings, several years ago when both the Housing Advisory Committee was bringing this forward, really what was the impetus. One thing that was underscored is that this is a long-term strategy in terms of anytime you're talking about new construction, it just takes time. So the comments that were made at that point was, let's allow for at least a few years for the minimum density code to be in effect, to see if it can have any kind of on-the-ground impacts. And I don't think that we're, at all unusual in that. I mean, that just is the nature of getting land secured, finding lenders, getting your building permits, and moving through the whole process. It just takes time. To your point, I pulled this map back up because we did want to get a better data point for the council in terms of how much acreage are we actually talking about when we say R3 and R4. And I think Amber touched on this, but we calculated 66.5 total acres when you pull out those RCCs, the Asante property, the city parks that are zoned R3 and R4, and all the others that are already built out. So, and that also does not take out the steep slope. There's a couple of steep slope properties, including one up off of Hillcrest. So if you take the 66.5, you take out the steep slope areas, and you're shooting more like in the 50s or so. And thinking about what our housing needs analysis said that the city is going to need 4 apartments in the next 20 years. We think it's about right in terms of where we're at in terms of inventory.
Okay, thanks.
Rob.
On the SDC deferral, what was the justification or rationale for implementing or for essentially writing that it's due at the time of getting the permits rather than, or at the initiation of the project rather than at the end? What's the rationale for that?
Well, there's a little bit of prognostication going on there because it's been that methodology for over 20 years. So I don't know exactly, but I would say that probably the primary driver is the simplicity of collection, because they're already coming in the SDCs are going to be calculated on like the number of fixtures and the number of impervious area, and all that stuff gets calculated off the site plan. So you're already working with the documents that are needed to determine what that SDC is. And so, that calculation, as well as the fact that you're already collecting fees at that time anyway, I think those two combined probably is why it was set up that way.
Thank you.
DJ.
I wanted to add to that question, Rob. That's also theoretically when you're hooking up to load the infrastructure, and that's what those fees are for, right? So it's a permit of use, SDC in a way, because you're adding to the load, you need to pay into the system, and that's when you're going to be tapping into those systems. So it makes sense to charge it up front. But also it makes sense to defer as well before you're actually putting the load on it when the house is theoretically occupied.
Yeah, it would seem, though, that when you say put the load on it, you're not actually using those services until there is a load. So the rest of it is just kind of, it's almost like because we can charge it, because it doesn't seem like there's no load on the system at that point.
No.
So the city's not losing anything. It's just that we have the ability now to essentially force that.
Right, and that's true for parks. I mean, you're not going to use the parks until they're occupying the houses. It's true for transportation. So correct.
Doug, did the Housing Advisory Committee have more to add?
Yeah, one other direction to look at this. Roughly 60 acres, you said, fits this category. And so to compare that to other buildable lands in the city that fit that category, roughly 535 acres fit that same category of underdeveloped by 10,000. And so that 50 or that 60 acres represents about 12% of buildable land. So when you're sort of saying, are we restricting too much land and is it too cumbersome on the community? It represents about 12% of buildable lands.
And did you have anything on behalf of the SDC incentive deferral that you wanted to add?
No, I think it's an excellent idea. We've talked about it and we've recommended the same. It feels like it feels like there's very little downside to that whole thing if SDCs are deferred till the end of or till C of O or sale.
Thank you. Valerie?
Yeah, I do have a question, and that's that I know that something that has come about through the legislature was that one of the things that DLCD is allowing is a trade for in the urban growth boundary as opposed to expansion. And then I read somewhere that we had gotten a grant to look into that. So is that something that is happening currently right now? It's looking at moving into our outside of our urban growth boundary to try to bring in more land. I just would like an update on what's going on with that.
Sure. Yeah, the city has been for about 2.5 months under contract with MIG, which is a consulting firm in the West, and they have an economist on staff as well. And so they have begun the process of identifying urban reserve lands, which the urban reserve is that sort of perimeter outside the urban growth boundary that is more of a 40-year land supply, at least it was intended that way. So they're looking at both property that is currently in the urban growth boundary that's really not been doing much in terms of just sort of stagnant almost, and looking at those that are outside to see if there's any opportunities to swap those.
Okay.
So yeah, that work's being done.
Okay, thank you.
Council, do you have other questions? Okay. No
And just a
further-
reminder, Mayor, I'm sorry, that we did have the email from Justin Gerlis that was put on there that had some other points on the minimum density.
Thank you. All right, on the topic of minimum density, does anybody have discussion? DJ?
Sure, I'll jump in here first. Yeah, I'd encourage everybody to read this email. It kind of spells out the challenges that are happening for utilizing land in this community with the current density standards. You'll see on point 1, using a real property from Jackson County Housing Authority, one apartment could be upwards of $380,000 per unit as advertised because of the challenges that directly correlated with the challenges of the minimum density percentages. You also notice that one thing that wasn't fully considered when we did this, and we couldn't anticipate seeing it, is minimum housing. We're seeing increased density in low density zones because builders and developers are allowed to build higher density in low density zones, which is heretofore unheard of. So accounting for that density is we are getting farther into our housing needs than we anticipated because of middle housing. Well, unfortunately, we're finding that this minimum density standard is so onerous that it's actually negatively impacting the ability to build density on middle housing applications, which is kind of shocking to me because the reason that that code is there is for higher density on lower density zoned properties. So it's hitting us from both sides, this minimum density. So basically, to put it simply, the current minimum density standards are prohibiting building. So if you look at those 66.5 acres, based on the information that we have, you are not going to be able to see the impact that it has simply because you won't see them being built on because the percentages are so high. So unless we adjust that, I can say with fair certainty that those acres won't be developed as council had intended. Now, the intention was great. Yeah, we need more housing. We have a housing need. So let's do something about it. I think unfortunately we have overreached a little bit and created an onerous circumstance that's going to prohibit building, which is contrary to the goal in the first place. So What I would like to see, what the home builders would like to see, is a reduction in that percentage and some accommodation made for middle housing applications.
Brian?
Well, there was one slide in here that talked about units completed by year, and there was a chart that showed in 2021 and 2022, the number of units that would have failed minimum density had it been in place in those years. In 2022, it was 7 units. In 2021, it was 13 units. And that's, assuming that they had failed, that's before they had tried to, replan their project in order to fit minimum density, which I'm sure some of them probably would have, and maybe some of them probably would not have. But the fact that, 92 to 95% of projects wouldn't have been affected by minimum density at all, I don't see that minimum density is this huge burden to bear for the housing community, especially when the whole goal of minimum density is to try to get these apartment complexes and higher density developments that we sorely, sorely need. We can talk about how expensive they are and everything, but that doesn't negate the fact that we still need them. And so if we don't have available R3 and R4 land for those to be developed on, and we already have a very small amount of that land that can be used for that, it's just going to make it harder to build those kinds of housing types. So I haven't seen that minimum density has hamstrung the building community. We're just talking about R3 and R4 zones, so I'd probably be in favor of, giving it another couple years and see how things play out. As staff said, these things take several years to see how they work, so that's where I'm at.
Joel?
Yeah, it's interesting. And what the reality is, it's hard to ascertain because there's a lot of moving causes. When I look at the same graph, I look at the 118, 148, and 100% that they would not have been affected, and that there were fewer of those built. And then the question is, well, why? And then I look at the green, and again in the green, there's fewer units built in 2023 compared to 2021 and 22. And there could be several reasons why, the economy or whatever. And then when I read Justin's email to us, he addresses the topic, and of course, nothing's 100%. But he talked about let me see here. That the minimum densities made it economically unfeasible to build it. And I don't know if these reductions in the amount constructed reflect that or not of the minimum density. I don't know. It certainly, if you believe Justin's email, it would have an influence on why there were fewer projects built in 2023 than 2021 and 2022.
Valerie?
And I think we all know the interest rate and building has just been more difficult. I will also tell you, having lived in the world of low-income housing and 3-story apartments, that they just increasingly get more expensive to build. Part of it is simply the elevator and the elevator fees and the maintenance fees and things that didn't used to be there that now are there. So they do become more difficult to build in terms of cost-wise. And the other factor we have going against us as opposed to Medford is Medford's their median income is much higher than ours. So until we bring up our median income, we've heard it for years, it's got to pencil out, it's got to pencil out, it's got to pencil out. And I'm not opposed. There are certainly some R3, R4 places that I can certainly see are made for large apartment buildings. But I think the greatest growth in our building in the last couple of years has been as a result of local builders trying to build duplexes, triplexes, and even quadplexes. So what I have said all along, and I believe seriously, it's going to be our local builders that get us into the position where we are. We do have several low-income housing that have come through, but those depend totally on state funding and federal funding and subsidies. And so those are the ones that you have to go through the state for. And I will tell you, most recently, trying to refinance some of those properties is becoming more and more difficult. So the banks are having more difficulty as well with the 3-story ones. So I would love to see them. We'd all love to see them, but they're not getting any easier to build. And I believe that it is the middle housing code and being flexible, because that's in our goal. It says right in the goal, to be flexible. It says here, commensurate with the financial capabilities of Grants Pass households and allow for flexibility of housing, location, type, and density. So I think if you're talking middle housing and it's stopping middle housing, that's where it needs to be adjusted, and we need to be flexible, because it's those units that are being built right now is the plexus, not the 3-story. So ultimately, when our economy turns around and we have more higher paying jobs, that's great. But until that starts to happen, it's going to be the duplexes and triplexes that are going to pull us out of our housing crunch right now. That's how I see it. So I think we need to be flexible with those projects and allow them to, it's this recent dense 2-story townhouse projects cannot achieve this target and should be able to, in the spirit of what we are trying to accomplish. So the spirit of what we are trying to accomplish is housing that is affordable. And if that means that we have to make adjustments for the middle housing code to make that happen, I think that's where we need to make them.
Dwayne.
I have to agree with Valerie on some of this stuff and some other people, but I think some of the things we're not looking at is, Oregon already has the most restrictive building codes in the country. We are the most restrictive to build anywhere. And we're going to be waiting for state and federal money. But if you just read the economic forecast that just came out for Oregon, we're not doing very well. I know the paper wants, some of the papers want to code it, but, manufacturing's down, our natural resources, we're negative on everything except one thing in that thing. And that's one that's been fused by dollars put in by the state. And that was Intel, which is chips. We don't have much chips around here, but I think there's some Medford, but the economic forecast is kind of low, and now we're going to be wanting to use state and federal money to build apartments. I could see that money drying up real fast soon, or if it already hasn't, in the future here, because you have to have money to build apartments, because the local builders are not going to build apartments here. So I think we need to be looking at our restrictions a little less likely and get our local builders to build as much as possible. I think we've been doing good on that, but I would like to do even more. So I'm in favor of less restrictive stuff. Thank you.
Vanessa?
My concern with going backwards on the minimum density at all is that we would have more of the same from when we had it before, and we know the historical build out for R3 and R4 land that is preserved for high-dense housing has been built out on a very low density basis. So I'm concerned that moving backwards at all will be more of that same, and that is the behavior that has gotten us where we are, where we don't have a diversity of housing stock. And we are very heavy in our single family housing stock. The ZTO repeal that recently happened returned about 150 acres back to higher density requirements. So we've already had a very recent reduction in the minimum density standards. What we're talking about today, as Brad outlined, when considering land that is not buildable or extreme slopes, we're only talking about 50 acres of land that really should be preserved for subject matter experts that can build really dense housing on that land. Our community is situated basically inside of a bowl around the hills. We cannot keep growing outward. We do have an urban reserve, but that land is very limited. So we have to be really strategic about the land that we do have available that is currently buildable. So if our local developers are saying that these 50 acres that they are not able to develop them as they need to be developed, that's perfectly fine. Their expertise lies elsewhere. It's needed elsewhere. But I say that this council should have the vision to hold that land for possibly an out-of-the-area builder, such as Chrisman Development, the development that will be going in on Nebraska and Ramsey. We were able to very strategically attract an out-of-area developer that will be providing 50-plus units on a piece of property that we were able to incentivize. So with that same vision that we had with that project, I would like us to continue that with the minimum density requirements. Many other communities throughout the state have minimum density requirements, and they are able to build apartments and dense housing. When I drive through Central Point or Medford, I see it, so I know it's possible, although we have a group of local subject matter experts that can't get it done. That doesn't mean it's entirely impossible. It means that maybe we just have to think outside of the box. But I would like to encourage this council to protect the 50 acres that we're talking about today.
All right, well, we do need to provide the staff with some direction on whether you're interested in retaining, amending, or repealing minimum density. I'm not sure I've heard a consensus here. Brian?
Well, in the interest of moving things along, I'll just move to retain the current minimum density ordinance and also to amend the SDC referral to align closer with the Medford model.
Is there a second? Seconded by Rick. Discussion on that? Valerie?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I think what you mentioned, Vanessa, is very true. We are in a bowl. And the truth of the matter is there's not a lot of projects that are flat enough to warrant what can happen in Medford that has much flatter open land. And that's the problem we come across, is that we don't have enough land. To make it economically feasible for them to build a project, it has to be large enough to get enough units to make it happen. So, like I said, there are certain properties in this community that I say, yes, you know, Terry Lane, some of those are big, flat properties, but I also feel, once again, if we're hindering local builders from doing townhouses and things on middle housing lots, then that is, in effect, not a good thing. And I can see down the road needing them, but we also are going through the process with the DLCD to look for more flat land that might be in our urban reserve to make that happen. So at this point, I'm not going to vote for it. I am in favor of doing the changing the SDC when they pay, but I am not in favor of retaining the middle housing as it is if it's indeed hindering our local builders.
DJ?
So for minimum density, the fact remains that it's hindering development on those lots, and it's not a matter of expertise, it's a matter of money, and that's just all there is to it. As far as the SDC goes, I could get behind that. However, I have a clarifying question. So Medford's model is interest-free, principal due on C of O. Do they also charge a fee? Grants Pass charges a fee for services alleged. So I'd align with that is if it's no fee, no interest, principal due on C of O.
No fee. Yeah, no fee or no interest in Medford.
Cool, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, well, the motion was to provide direction of retaining the minimum density ordinance and then amending the municipal code regarding SDC's deferral to align with Medford. And Brian, you made that motion, so how do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
No.
Joel?
No.
Dwayne?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
No.
All right, we've got a 4-4 split. So it's kind of weird on a directional ordinance, but, or motion rather, I'll go ahead and make the yes vote. Any further discussion on this topic today? All right. Moving on to our next item, Cape Man Pool. Hi, Josh.
Good afternoon, Council Mayor. So we've got kind of again, another tag team presentation. I'm going to provide a brief few overview slides, and then the YMCA CEO, Jay Berry, will be coming up to give a presentation on the YMCA's ultimate goals for a new facility. I'll then come back up after Jay's presentation and fill in some gaps with some further information for council to consider. So, Caveman Pool discussion. With this, the subject and summary is city staff is seeking direction from city council on how to proceed with the potential YMCA partnership and the Caveman Pool project as a whole. This is in relation to the council goal of infrastructure. For the brief background, on April 29, 2024, City Council reviewed next step options for the Caveman Pool project. Those options included 2 different pool designs, cost-saving measures, potential funding options, and a potential partnership with the YMCA. The City Council requested staff and the YMCA bring back information on a potential partnership within 30 days. So that's where we're at right now with this partnership option. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the YMCA presentation. And Jay Berry, if you're willing to come on up, we can get you started. So if you just click the mouse, it'll do its thing.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the councilors and the mayor for inviting us to present on this topic. What I would like to talk about today is Caveman. I'd also like to talk about what you know about the YMCA, and then what you don't know about the YMCA, what our future vision is, how the Y will deliver on this mission, the resources needed to deliver on this mission, and a timeline. So the question has arisen, the city has 6.5 million, and there seems to be a question of, are they going to invest that into the Caveman Pool or the YMCA? I think that's the wrong question. The YMCA is in total support of the city, no matter what you decide to do with the funding. What we are looking for is a future partnership that is not contingent upon whatever you do or whatever you decide to do with Caveman. We've enjoyed managing Caveman for several years, and we look forward to continuing to do that. But again, it's not an and or question in our view. Now, what you know about the YMCA, our membership has exploded. We are literally busting at the seams. So from 2020 to 2024, our membership has grown to over 11,000. This number was identified last Thursday, so you could probably add another 100 onto this today. That's how fast we are growing. Now, this is just a chart that breaks down how we contribute to the community. And I'm going to have to turn because I can't even see my own slide. My eyes are going bad. But basically, we have over 11,000 members. We have 2,500 that are senior citizens. We have 2,500 that are under the age of 18. Last year, we had 215,000 swipes by members. We're on pace for 2024 to reach about 275,000. So again, we are growing. We provide child watch for our members, so when they come in, they can actually have their children taken care of so they can get some time for themselves and spend a couple hours working out. We have 157 children that are involved in preschool, after school, and summer programs. We also have 85 members that are involved in various wellness classes that we offer that help them to deal with chronic disease, whether it's diabetes, living with pain. So we offer those classes. We also have over 35 classes that we offer that are water aerobics, Tai Chi, yoga, you name it. 72% of our members are receiving some sort of scholarship or financial aid for either membership or programs. We have We sponsored the turkey trot. We had a very successful turkey trot last year, and that's something that we're going to continue to do. We think it's a huge component of the community. We also provide youth sports. We have over 950 children that are involved in our youth sports programs. We have swim lessons, we also have 750 kids that have learned how to swim at the Y. And 107 of those receive funding through YUSA grants. We also have two swim teams. We have a youth program, and we also have a master's program, and we are working collaboratively with Grants Pass, Hidden Valley or North Valley, as well as Medford, to increase the amount of participation in those swim programs for the whole community. We also manage 2 pools. So we manage Caveman, an outdoor pool, and we also manage our indoor pool year-round. Adult sports, we have 400 participants in our adult sports programs. Those are very popular. We also have a wellness center that offers massage, red light therapy, life coaching, and really focused on recovery, because it's not just about stress, working out, it's about how do you recover. We have 145 staff, dedicated staff, and we have about 45 volunteers that work at the Y. So that's our impact on the community. Josh, it won't, there we go, okay. What you don't know about the Y is our future vision. We're very excited about our future vision. We are at war, and we are losing. The enemy is not another nation. The enemy is chronic disease. Now, just to let you know how formidable of an opponent it is, the Department of Defense last year spent $916 billion to defend this country. That's almost 3% of our gross domestic product. Do you have any idea what we spent on health care? $4.5 trillion. 86% of that, $3.9 trillion, went to chronic disease alone. So that's almost 15% of our GDP. Almost 5 times what we spent on defending this country. Now, that comes out to $13,493 per person. That's 4,000 higher than the next nation. Now, Sun Tzu, great Chinese general, he's also the author of The Art of War, suggests if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. Well, chronic disease is the enemy, and oddly enough, it's what we do to ourselves. So chronic disease arises from our personal lifestyle choices. So let's dive into that a little bit more. That means our nutritional choices on a day-to-day basis. That means whether we decide to smoke or drink, if we use prescription drugs or recreational drugs. How much time do we spend in front of a screen, watching TV, working on a computer, on our phones? How much time do we play? How much time are we actually active? Our sleeping patterns. Stress. We all have stress, but the important part is how do you manage stress? And mental health. So you could suffer from depression. It's not about the fact that you're suffering from depression, it's how you choose to treat that depression. All those things are chronic disease. Now, how are we delivering on the vision? How are we going to conquer chronic disease? Well, if you take a look at our current healthcare system, we have the best technology around. We have the most powerful pharmaceutical products around. We have the most incredible surgeons in the world. And yet, we do not focus on change behavior. That's what's missing. So we don't want to eliminate traditional medicine and replace it with changed behavior. We want to combine the two to become more powerful. Now, you've probably heard of a wellness wheel. I think it's a wellness arch. And if you look at the 8 different dimensions, you'll see intellectual, emotional, social, physical, spiritual, financial, environmental, and occupational. For us to build the wealth of our community, we have to look at all of these dimensions. And most importantly, if you know how an arch works, there's a keystone. And that keystone is called physical. That's health. And you've heard the saying, if you don't have health, you have nothing. And that's exactly what happens. Somebody develops an illness, that affects their occupation, that very quickly affects their financial world, that affects them emotionally, intellectually, socially. So you can see the domino effect. If you lose health, everything else crumbles. Now, we currently have partnerships. This is a network that we're developing. So we have partnerships with All Care, The Hub, Turning Point, Youth Project X Plus, 4-Way Community Foundations. These are all partners that are helping us to deliver on all of these different dimensions of health. So it's not just the Y and the swim and gym. We actually have partnerships where we're going to help deal with the whole individual. Now, the reason we do this is because we want to increase the quality of life. We also want to connect people that are in urgent need of these resources. We need to be the person or the organization that's helping them connect. So public safety is the end result. We get people to they have a problem, we get them to the resources that they need to solve those problems. Now, healthy, if you go to a physician and they talk about health or they start defining health, they're going to use a word called homeostasis. That's a very obnoxious word, but basically what it means is balance. So if your body has thousands of regulatory systems that are working nonstop all day long. They monitor things like respiration, oxygen content, iron content, blood sugar content, even acid levels in your stomach. If those are out of balance, you are not in homeostasis. You are basically in a disease state. So for example, blood sugars, if your blood sugars are out of control, you are pre-diabetic or you are a type 2 diabetic. That's a disease, that's a chronic disease. So the goal is to get these people into balance. So we have created a program called Balance. And the tool that we use in that program is an integrated practice unit, or an IPU. Now this is an IPU. So you have a navigator at the center, and you have a member that meets with that navigator. And I'll just give you an example of how that works. A physician has a patient that is a 10-year-old obese child. They would send that individual to our navigator. We have a program called Smart Moves. We've built it in coordination with All Care. So it is a program designed to modify the child's behavior, thus removing the need for medication. And so that's an example of how the IPU works. Here's another example. You have a physician that has a 40-year-old patient that has knee problem. They send him to a physical therapist. Now, when you go to a physical therapist, you will be released once you've achieved your ADLs, your activity of daily living. That does not mean you are pain-free, fully functional, or have strength through full range of motion. What it means is you're a walking injury. You're primed for another injury that's going to be more costly and usually more severe. So after the person is released or discharged from physical therapy, they would go to a program that we call Life After Therapy, and that's delivered by a personal trainer. That closes the gap from therapy to independence. So that personal trainer will further condition that individual so they are independent. Once they're independent, they can choose, hey, I want to take swim lessons. I want to learn how to swim, to help maintain those changes. This is all done within an IPU structure. The key is that the IPU changes as the individual's health changes.
Are we going to get to the ask soon?
Right next.
Thank
Next slide. Good timing. So that is the IPU. Now I want to show you an example from child obesity. Now this is something we're working at right now. So the average life expectancy right now is 77.5 years. A 10-year-old child, it's going to cost $1,000 a month for this medication for the rest of their life. So that's 66.5 years. That's $12,000 a year. That's almost $800,000 a year for the life of that one child. We also don't know what the side effects are, and we know that if they go off the medication, they are going to gain the weight back plus more. Our solution, focusing on behavior, is $700 for a 24-week program. Now let's just say this individual forgets a little bit, so they have to go through it twice. So over that 66.5 years, we're spending $1,400 to control obesity. So that's the difference. The ask. There are hundreds of examples of partnerships where the Y partners with cities. This is just a few of them. Mitch Park, where the city provided land, capital, and shared the operational expenses. Downriver, the city funded. They retained the ownership of the land in the building. The Y simply operated it. When it comes to YMCA at Seton, the city contributed the capital, and that was it. So there's lots of different ways to form these partnerships based on what is best for the city and what's best for the YMCA. Our ask is we have about a 10-acre lot in Allen Creek that we're looking for. We would love if the city would donate that property and provide us with an advantageous lease. So $1 a year for 100 years, and we'll pay it in advance. So that's our ask. The timeline. GRO is the company that we work with. They're the ones that built Salem. They're the ones that built the Eugene facility. We are already in contact with them. We've started the process. That's going to be a 4-year journey. So that's from planning all the way to the last coat of paint on the building. Planning is a year. Capital campaign, 3 years. Now, if we go on the Eugene facility, that was $650 a square foot. We're looking to build a 100,000 square foot facility. You're looking at $65 million that we would need to raise. We would love the city to stand by us as we go after the state and federal dollars as well as private donations. Architect, that's about a year. That's about a year and a half. Yeah, I think I lost it. Go back. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. Architect, we're looking at about a year and a half. Contractor, we're looking at about 2 years. Ribbon cutting, about 4 years out. And again, a lot of that is dependent on the capital campaign, how fast we can raise that money. So that is my presentation, and I thank you for your time.
Council, do you have any questions for the Y? Vanessa?
Yes, thank you. Would you mind restating your ask? It was on the highlighted landslide.
Let's see. Our ask is a partnership, so whether that's capital or, the land is the big thing. If we could actually have the land donated and a strong lease, a favorable lease going forward, that's the ask.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Rick?
Thank you for the presentation. So part of today's discussion was try and, I would say, educate us as a council as we look forward or in the future for Caveman Pool. if Caveman Pool was under your ownership, how would you view it going forward?
I don't think we would want to put ourselves in the position to own it. I think, yeah, I think operating it, no problem. But ownership, yeah, I think Josh is going to probably dive into that a little bit more in terms of what's involved with that project.
I'm sorry, that was not my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't ask the right question. So, just theoretical, if you're owning a car, you reach a point where you put money into it, you don't put money into it. So, not that you're going to own it or would own it, but what would you see for the city as we move forward? Because you're in the activity you're in, how would you, as part of your assets and your facilities, what would be your perspective of what we might consider as we go forward?
Well, I personally think that you are beyond the usable life of that car. So I think putting any more money into it is going to give you limited returns. The other challenge is it's an outdoor pool. You're really looking at maybe 70 days tops of utilization. So it's a pretty big investment for a very short-term return.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for the Y? Vanessa?
At the very beginning of the presentation, you had stated that the city has $6.5 million. I wanted to know, is the Y aware of the strings that come with those monies? One is the Urban Renewal Agency. It has to be located within a very specific tract. And then the additional one is the American Rescue Plan dollars, where those monies have to be in contractual agreements by December of this year. Is the Y aware of both of those contingencies?
Yes, we are aware of those. And again, we think that's beyond our scope. That's not really our decision to make. We want to support the city no matter what the decision is. But that's not our ask. We're not asking for the $6.5 million.
Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple quick questions. It looked like from the chart of Y membership, it's gone up significantly over the past 2 or 3 years to the tune of about 3.5 times, which is great. Do you have any idea, can you explain what the Y thinks that increase may be attributed to, or what the factors were for that huge increase?
I think a big part of it is post-pandemic effect. People are now less hesitant and they're coming back to their old lifestyle choices. I think the other big component of it is our balance program, because we're not just about membership anymore. We're about meeting the individual, finding what their challenges are, providing solutions. I think that's a huge appeal.
Was the membership higher before COVID and then it dropped and then it has come back up?
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Can you speak to, I'm not aware of like membership pricing at the Y. What's like the range of a membership cost?
Actually, I should have brought my membership director with me. We are very, very competitive. I would say we're probably in the neighborhood of 65 for an individual, and then depending on what services you want to add on to that.
Okay, great. And then just the last quick question. I know the Y has been at its current location for a very long time. Does anyone know exactly when the Y started operations at the current site?
1982? 3.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
And Valerie, she's right behind you.
Yeah, I'm behind you. Yeah, I have a question because I know, like I said, you're working with All Care. Have you, it seems that one of the things that is I've seen happening, it's kind of a trend, is that like with the Oregon Health Plan or whatever, that you offer rates applicable, or that people who have certain health plans are able to get a discount. Is that something that has happened recently that may also affect the surge? Just
I think that's a contributing factor, but it really comes down to engagement, because a lot of times people are getting that benefit as part of their insurance coverage, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to participate in any type of physical activity or going to the Y or any other facility. So that's really about us engaging them.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Council. Josh Hopkins, Park Superintendent, back again. So I'll be providing a little bit more information regarding lease options if council would like to consider them, addressing some of the concerns that came out of the last meeting when we talked about that, as well as other ways that the city could partner with the Y in a way to help them move forward. First, I just did want to start with the Allen Creek Reserve property. This isn't the full Allen Creek Reserve. There's a few parcels that are not contiguous to each other. This is about a 9.52 acre total between 3 tax lots. It's currently outside of city limits, and it is within the urban growth boundary. It is expected to get annexed in the fall 2024. So as far as partnership lease options with the Y, we would be looking at a lease. We'd be looking at something that is a low lease with a longer term. Mr. Berry provided, the dollar at 100 years type of a thing. They currently have a similar type lease with the county where they're at. I think it's $1 for 7 years. With their capital funding campaign, having more years added on to that lease really helps them with that funding, whether it's with grants and or just to convince people to invest in this facility moving forward. As far as lease terms go, council could consider to have the exterior of the campus still be under care and control of the YMCA, but open to the public. This would allow for other pathways and for that exterior to act as kind of a public park, but it would still be under the YMCA's rules, regulations, everything like that. SDCs were used for the purchase of these parcels. Recreational facility is an allowable use. Additionally, we'd be more justified showing that we're keeping it with that SDC ruling by having that exterior campus still open to the general public to engage in recreational activities on. Mr. Berry provided a 4-year timeline for development. We could also potentially add in some benchmarks to make sure that there's an incentive to continue on that 4-year timeline with that development process. And then if this partnership was looked at as something to replace the current Caveman Pool project, you could decide to lock in the Caveman Pool rate of $5 as a non-member drop-in rate, with increases only being allowed by the city council. Currently, the YMCA, I believe, has a $12 day use. Yeah, for just a drop-in rate. People that aren't members of the YMCA are still able to go to the YMCA pool for $12. This would lock in current pricing so that if someone did not want to be a member of the YMCA, they still had access to a pool within the city of Grants Pass. On the YMCA side, they'd be banking that even if someone was hesitant to be a member of the YMCA after numerous trips and seeing all the other stuff that the Y has to offer, they would be enticed to just join up. And then we could build in an agreement for future multimodal pathway development on this parcel and helping it connect into the other parcels that we're currently been working on. It's been a long since project plan is to develop a second part of that Allen Creek Trail on the other side of the creek as well, connecting up towards that New Hope area. There's also the potential to add some sort of funding assistance, although the Y is not currently asking for that. They're really just asking for the property. With the ARPA dollars, those would be eligible to be used. Council could consider allocating a portion of ARPA funds to help kick off the design phase, so long as council or the YMCA was sure they were going to meet our ARPA timelines for that. Additionally, City Council could look to create a maintenance reserve. That's something other YMCA city partnerships have done, and that would be if the City Council did opt to pursue this partnership as development of a replacement option for the current pool facility, you could set aside a portion of the general fund requirement for the current Caveman Pool as a future maintenance reserve so that 10 years from now, if the YMCA had a critical failure, they could come to council and request funding for that. Right now, the aquatics budget for the Caveman Pool is about $95,000, so if you chose a portion of that. When I worked at the city of Corvallis, we had the Osborne Aquatic Center. It was managed and run by the Parks and Recreation Department, but it was owned by the school district, and that's kind of the lease that they came up with, was that the school district provided a maintenance reserve that when major repairs came to be needed, the city was able to request funds from the school district for that. So at this point, we just need some council direction on how you'd like to proceed with this project and the partnership. We have a couple of options here. City Council is interested in pursuing a partnership with the Y, as well as continuing with our current Caveman Pool project. The City Council could also be interested in pursuing a partnership with the Y as a replacement for the Caveman Pool project. Additionally, the City Council could be interested in not pursuing a partnership with the YMCA and then still proceed with our own project at the Caveman Pool, or proceeding with neither project. I do have 3 more slides. One's just the next step slide saying if council is interested, I can bring up the last presentation from the April meeting to go in detail on that. And then we do have slides regarding the current cost implications for the Caveman Pool. Council saw this already, but just to take it down to, summarize it, we're still 7 million off from what we need for the Caveman Pool. And then there were some funding options for consideration, whether that was reallocation from ARPA, URA, interfund loans, or going out for some form of bond. So we do have those options to review as well if council is interested in them. But right now, this is pretty much where we're at with the current discussion on the YMCA partnership. And then depending on where we go with that, council can have further discussions on how to proceed with the Caveman Pool.
Thanks, Josh. Council, what questions do you have? Brian?
Thanks, Josh. Could you remind me the acreage of that Allen Creek property?
Between the 3 tax lots, it's 9.52.
9.52, okay. And the YMCA currently, I did a rough calculation, but it looks like it's about 3¼ acres on the current site. And then I know there's several off-site locations as well. I mean, could I ask someone from the Y to clarify their current, the amount of space they currently use?
Yeah, you can hold up there.
I'll take that one. Roughly, if you draw a line, it's a little tricky because all that parking lot west of YMCA is actually the fairgrounds. So we only own, or part of the lease is like only 2 lines of that, if that makes sense. So roughly around 2.5 acres is, I think, what we are actually like in control of, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then do you have off-site locations, or is everything on that one site?
We do have a childcare facility off-site. I believe that's our only one, and that's just near, it's like near Cartwright's kind of.
Yeah, it's I know where that site.
The old RV place, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at the moment? Vanessa?
No, she's pointing to me.
Oh, Valerie?
My current question is as you build, if there's a partnership or whatever, how much say, when you go to the architect, to have part of it like be open to outside? Is that something that's been considered, or have we not even gotten to that part of the question?
Are you talking about the pool facility itself?
Yeah, the new pool facility being that they're, because, that's one of the things I know a lot of people really like about Caveman is that it has some outdoor access. And so I was just wondering whether that was something that you considered in moving forward.
Well, I don't think we're.
We need to use the mic so that you're on the television.
Still yours. Yeah, I think we're not even to the point of planning yet, but I would envision, if I were looking at my desirable list, I would say some sort of garage door system where you can actually open up and have open air to the pool. Yep.
Any other questions? All right. Well, our discussion here is titled Caveman Pool Discussion, but I think it's not really about Caveman Pool, it's about the YMCA here. So does anybody have discussion on whether you're interested in pursuing a partnership at this time? Joel?
Well, I think it's a no-brainer that, yeah, we do. I think it's good for the community. Everyone I've talked to, I was talking to the Chamber of Commerce this morning, I was talking to people at church, I was talking to people I play cards with, I was talking to kids on the street. I was talking to people that were attracted to the community for one reason or the other, and they talked about the why. Also talking to a county commissioner, and he said they would be very interested in partnering with us as well. So I put that in the Y's ear. Out of curiosity, we had a trip just really quick to Jerusalem, and we stayed at the YMCA. They had housing, which we could or could not have. It was run by the Muslim Brotherhood, and it was interesting. Anyway, they really reach out and they believe in diversity, and they do a good job in the community.
Valerie, then Rob.
Yeah, I would go in favor of going into a partnership with the YMCA. I pretty much agree with everything they said in terms of crisis that we have. And I know that the acreage of Cave Mountain Pool, it's not big. It gets used 72 days out of the year. I mean, there's just a lot of things that make it to where, the majority of growth in our community is south of the river. So I think this is a plus, and we talk a lot about the fact that youth don't have a lot to do in our community, and I think partnering with a Y would be a positive.
Rob.
Is there a dollar value to the land that we're talking about potentially donating here?
I can look that up as we continue to discuss that. I'll add it up and get on there and see what the dollar amount is. And also, if council wants to, we do have the other presentation, because this was one portion from our last workshop. You wanted us to come back to you with potential YMCA partnership discussions. But depending on what you're going to do with the pool, I think we still need to revisit some previous information, which we have pulled up also for Josh to go through, which is including the cost of the pool, the funding gap, pool layouts, and those kind of things that we still need direction on with the pool. Unless this discussion was like, we're going to go with the Y, we're not going to do the pool, then we don't have to have that discussion. But if we still have pool, we have ARPA dollars we need to look at obligating, and et cetera. So unless the pool is totally off the table, I think we need to have further discussion about the pool, if you would entertain that, Mayor.
All right, anybody else? Are you ready to talk about Caveman? Joel.
So I think there's two viable options for the Caveman Pool. This pool isn't going to be built until 3 years, probably. Let's give them a grace period of another year, 4 years. I don't know if we can keep the existing facility going. So that's one option. You keep it going in place till this is finished, and then make a decision on the Caveman Pool. We wouldn't have to make it today. The other option would be to discontinue the Caveman Pool, which would give us only one pool for those 4 years. The advantage to that option would be that it would free up the general fund dollars for public safety, which we know is at a premium. I think either option is politically acceptable. I do know when you don't have enough money to go around, and you start cutting it upsets people. And it's an economic fact that you have to do that. And that's not a pleasant thing. So I would ask that we consider that as well. I've been through that with another agency, and it's stressful.
All right, let's continue with the pool presentation.
So I can bring up the pool presentation that we had last time. Again, part of it does decide if council did choose to just go with the YMCA option. But in the meantime, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because council did review the same presentation in April. I didn't update the date. So for the next steps with the pool, what we were looking at was 2 different pool options for one. We had a base design option that came in at $10.2 million, and that included the parking lot, bathhouse, 2 stainless pool vessels, water play feature in the activity pool, 3/4 meter diving board, and a water slide. Additionally, we had another option that included additional amenities, which would require increasing the depth to 12.6 to add a dive platform, 2-meter dive board, additional drop slide, a half-court basketball court, and then a couple of change options for pool heating as far as broilers, heat chillers, things along those lines. And for this project on the full amenity list, it came between 10.8 to 10.87 million. RSA did provide us a list of cost-saving options. Not all of these cost-saving options save us what we see. It just takes it away from the direct cost. Some of it put it on other packages that we'd have to source outside of a contract with the design and the developer. And what we do is save on any sort of markup by doing that. In the bathhouse, they identified $233,000 worth of saving options, which again, that's just off the direct construction cost. A lot of these features would still need to be purchased just at a lower rate. Site work savings of about $20,000, parking lot savings of just shy of $50,000. We do have a partnership option for cost sharing on the parking lot with District 7. We're still waiting for direction before exploring that further. And then the big cost options savings were with the pool features. One was to take any competitive swim features out of the bid package, put that into that fixtures package where we'd source that outside of it and save $34,000 off the actual construction costs. And then switching the pool vessels from the stainless steel to the traditional shotcrete, that would save a little south of $900,000 for the whole project. As a whole, the design option savings came out to $1.2 million potentially for this project. RSA still did recommend a markup of 25% of the direct construction cost. This increased the project up to $13,570 or $13,578,391 to $13,587,592. With that 25%, it's for permitting cost as well as provides a little bit of contingency built into there, and it provided more of the engineering and phase 2 and things like that that we still don't have a contract in place with. The current resources we have for the pool was $1.2 million from ARPA, $5 million from the URA. The LB 6393 has $140,937 cash balance, totaling out to $6,340,937. That put us down to still being short $7,246,655 if we were to incorporate the add-on features as well as not take any of the cost-saving options. As far as funding options for consideration, we had a few potential options here. One is to increase allocations from either ARPA or the URA. This obviously would decrease resources for other projects. URA does require a hearing, and ARPA, I think at this point it's safe to say it's likely going to have timeline issues for when we need to have some of the stuff under contract and ready to go. As we move forward with this, you almost got to consider you're looking at, an $8.2 million shortfall, since the 1.2 from ARPA, with the timeline issues we have, we may not be able to hit those. Then we had the option of an interfund loan. It may not be viable with the city's current budget and other obligations like water treatment plant and other loans that we have going on at the time. And the final option we had was a voter-approved general obligation bond. It may be the most viable option if you chose to do the full cost of the pool. That'd be like $13 million. With that, it came out to between 29.5 cents to 30 cents per thousand. We all know that they shot down the Three Rivers bond in the county side, and the Humane Animal Control increase did just recently get removed from the voters as well. The general fund back may cause other impacts for other loans, as in water treatment plant loans and things like that. Timing considerations, that's one of the big things. If we are going to go through a general obligation bond, it's really about a 2-year process to make sure that we're picking the right election to put it on, plus doing all the groundwork to really sell this project to the community. And then, you've got to keep it and make sure that you don't have other bonds, levies, taxes on future election cycles that are going to make the voters feel like they're getting hit from all sides. And then we need to consider the feasibility of the community supporting a GO bond increase for what is currently a 70-day seasonal outdoor pool. Again, the last two tax things on the ballot both were shot down by the voters. Partnership considerations, we talked about the School District 7, cost sharing for the parking lot itself. The parking lot estimate is $681,232. We would try to get the school district to pay the majority of that cost, since the majority of the time of the year outside of that 70 days, they would be the ones mainly using that facility for the parking. And then we just reviewed the YMCA partnership for like a new indoor aquatic facility as well. This is where we kind of left off at the last workshop. We had needed council direction on which pool design you were interested in proceeding with, as well as what cost-saving options you were interested in proceeding with, and then which funding options you were interested in pursuing, as well as how would council like to fund the shortfall, or are we looking to fund the full amount of the project, freeing up the other resources for other projects. And then that is when we had the discussion about the caveman pool, where council directed us to come back in 30 days or so with the YMCA stuff as well. So again, call to action, council discretion, move to further workshops. But really between the two, there's a few options we can move forward with on the YMCA on the partnership wise that affects the project we currently have or keeps the current project going. It's really up to council. If we are going to keep the current Cape Ann Pool project going, we need to have direction on the first 4 bullet points you see here.
Rob, did you have a question? Rob, then Joel.
So on the cost-saving list, changing the construction to traditional Shot Creek was almost $1 million savings. But it's a little confusing. On that sheet, there were savings that wasn't the full amount, meaning that you're going to have to replace it. Many of the things on that same list are going to have to be outsourced or purchased elsewhere. So on the $900,000 quote-unquote savings, was that because the Shot Creek would be less expensive than stainless by $900,000, or does that mean it has to be then outsourced to somewhere else, and we'd end up paying some percentage of that $900,000?
On the list provided for RSA, the Shot Creek option is $900,000 less expensive than the stainless steel pool option. So that was the savings between the two. It doesn't need to be sourced out. It would be all bundled into the same bid package.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So here's my thoughts. I don't think Caveman Pool is ripe for a decision. I wouldn't, it is in my mind, but I don't think it is with everybody else up here as a consensus. I think the partnership with the Y is a no-brainer. And as soon as Rick gets out of the bathroom, I was going to make the following motion.
We're just in questions at the moment. Did you have a
What's that?
Question?
Oh, we're not into discussion? Okay.
Just questions? Did you have a question? No? Okay. Did you have a question? No? Anybody have any questions? Okay. If you don't have any questions, then Joel, go ahead.
Well, I won't make the motion until Rick gets back so he can fully participate, because we all need to be a part of this. Aaron, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say to fill time, we did get a response for Councilor Pell's question about property value. If you'd like to have that. JC, you want to provide that?
Yeah, so the 3 tax lots were almost 100% purchased with SEC money. Was about $731,000. The current market value on the 3 tax lots is a little bit over $440,000.
So for the discussion purposes then, it was meant to be a park. It was purchased with those funds. I would include the $5 fee for drop-in, same as Caveman Pool. And I would go ahead and join that and proceed with that partnership. Then with Caveman Pool, I would keep it operating if we can until it's built. And then at that point in time, see where we're at. In the meantime, we would have to, as part of this motion, free up the ARPA dollars, because we won't spend it on the multi-million-dollar obligation to rebuild Caveman Pool and reallocate that to other resources. So that's the motion I'm going to make when Rick comes back, unless somebody else makes another motion without him being here.
Okay, please go ahead and state your motion. Yeah.
Okay, help me so I remember it all. Okay, I make a motion to proceed with a partnership with the YMCA with a $5 stipulation for non-member participation in the pool, same as the Caveman Pool. And with that, part of that motion also then I would have the Caveman Pool continue to be operated if it can, depending on the feasibility of it, because it's getting more and more expensive every year. But that we proceed with the aim to keep it open during the interim until that pool is completed. And in the meantime, we'd free up the ARPA dollars that are allocated to the pool and reallocate it to other projects needed by our community.
Is there a second? Seconded by Val. Discussion on that? Rob?
I understand, I guess, Joel's desire to paint a big picture with one motion, but that one motion to me is incredibly convoluted and just has so many different moving pieces that they don't belong together. You know, I'm really interested in some type of partnership with the YMCA. You know, whether it's, and it seemed like their ask was that they need some land, they need a place for a new building. So, you know.
You're right, Rob. I'll amend the partnership to include that land, and then we proceed with the partnership. You're right. We need to be specific on that.
Okay, well, you just added yet another piece, but that's okay. I was actually looking to move in the other direction, Joel, and trying to make it simpler and having the pieces be really clean and separate. But, so to me, you know, a partnership is one thing, and the Caveman Pool is a separate subject. And to me, fresh air and recreation outdoors is completely different than indoor recreation. You know, I personally walk my neighborhood probably 700 times a year, and that's very close to very accurate figure. And yet I've never walked on an indoor treadmill, and I hope that I never will. So I look at those two things as being totally different, in the same way that, you know, swinging a golf club 70 to 100 times, hitting a ball into a net is completely different than playing around a golf. So to me, the outdoor Caveman Pool is completely different than the indoor potential or possibility of an indoor facility. So I just can't, you know, I would have to vote no to that motion because it's too many, I believe, unrelated pieces strung together with duct tape and chewing gum.
Joel?
So if I understand you, Rob, you like to swim outdoors, and you want an outdoor swimming facility. The Y, as I understand it, is going to have a rollback roof, and it can be an outdoor pool and an indoor pool. So we'll still have a facility like that in Grants Pass.
All right, I have Vanessa, then Rick, then Brian. Oh, are you done, Rob? No. Okay, Vanessa, then Rick, then Brian.
My question was answered. Thank you.
Rick?
So I'm sort of the tail end of the discussion, but I like the idea of keeping two subjects, the Caveman Pool and the Y is separate. Thank you.
Brian?
So it doesn't have to be an either or. You know, the Y even said so themselves. The population of this city in 1983, when the Y opened and when Caveman was already running for approximately 25 years, the population was about 16,000 people. That number of people supported both of those facilities. And as we all know, the population of the city now is, you know, 40,000-ish. So to go backwards and to go from having both of those facilities to only having one facility and that one facility being way out on the far edge of town that is, you know, arguably, you know, more difficult for a lot of residents to get to, I don't think that's a good move for the long-term vision of the city. I think Caveman Pool in its current location has served generations of families very well. And I think, you know, although the growth is in the south part of the city, that doesn't mean that this part of the city is shrinking. There's, you know, just as many, if not more people in this part of the city as there were, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I am tentatively in favor of partnering with the Y. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like at this point. I have some concerns about that property and the fact that we just had a discussion about housing and how we're very short on housing, and that's, you know, 9 acres of potentially high density housing, you know, so there's another piece that could potentially compete for that property. So I don't know if I'm in favor of that ask per se. I don't know that I'm against that ask either, but certainly not ready to make that decision right now. But I am in favor of doing what we can to keep both facilities going, renovating Caveman Pool. It serves a completely different part of the city. It serves a completely different set of activities. And I think if we have some vision and we put some effort into it, we can make both of those things happen.
Dwayne, and then Joel.
Guess it's time for me to weigh in. I have problems with the Caveman. I don't think I've been secretive about that. And you know, I believe we need to do something with that ARPA money as soon as possible. If that's given to Mid-Road Foundation, I would be for that $1.2 million. I really think that we need to get that going as soon as possible. Caveman Pool is just not going to be done at that time if we move forward on that. I'm really against using the URA money for the Caveman Pool because I feel it could be valuable somewhere else. I think that's really what it's supposed to be used for, not a pool that gets used for 70 days out of the year. I would be for a total bond of the Caveman Pool. If the people want to pay for it, then they get to weigh in. It's not me making a decision whether it's a yes or no. The voters will say, hey, I want to spend 13, 14 million, whatever it is, on a pool that gets used for 70 days. I know how that is because I have a pool and it only gets used for a certain amount of time per year. I haven't used my pool yet. It's too cold. Maybe I'll use it on Thursday when it gets 90. You know, and I have solar and a heater and all that, so I know how a pool works. I remember when the YMCA pool was built, because my family moved here in 1983, and it's expanded since then. So I would just not agree that Caveman and this pool, if we built the YMCA, is too far apart, because honestly, I grew up riding my bike all over this town, and I don't think it's that far. And if people want to use the Y, they're going to drive over there. Well, we got public transportation. You know, that's the big thing now. So I think that we can figure that out. I would be in favor of some kind of partnership with the Y. I think it's time we move them out of their location they're at now, and it's obviously by the numbers being way more used by the citizens of this area than in the Caveman Pool. I think they've proven those numbers up there. It's doing a lot more than just a swimming pool. So it's keeping, I'm not going to go through the whole list that the gentleman talked about, but I think it's a good thing for our area, for our children, kids, the community. And I don't think the city's paying $65 million for it. I think we're just asking for a small portion. And I think that's a good investment for the city. Those are just where I kind of stand on things. Thank you.
Joel.
So the motion involves land that was bought for recreation within the city, and this is a recreational facility. It was purchased with those system development charges for recreation. The motion also does not say that we're going to get rid of the Caveman Pool at this point in time. It says we're going to delay that decision as we move forward. And because that's, it probably is ripe to be decommissioned, especially given our funding needs in public protection, police and fire, and our general fund. But I thought it was appropriate for some members on the council that didn't want to make that decision today. We could delay that decision, depending on how much it's going to cost to keep it operating, and that may be prohibitive because it is an old facility. And it's a no-brainer. I think we need to keep our credibility with our public on expenses in general fund, and I think we need to provide services, including a pool that can be open in the summertime and serves more than 70 days. To be responsive to the taxpayers like that in a partnership that is very economically attractive to all parties is a no-brainer. The people I talk with in the public would be, I think, disappointed if we didn't do it. So.
Valerie.
I just have a question, Joel, because I know you were the first and I was the second. If you wanted to change that motion to just take out the continuing of Caveman Pool, because like you just said, I mean, that doesn't really need to be in there, nor does it freeing up the ARPA funds, because that's, like I said, those a big chunk. I think those will come as more discussions happen. And what we're really kind of trying to look at is giving the Y the movement forward, because what I see happening, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again, is we make and we punt and we punt and we punt, and while we're punting and putting things off, prices are going up exponentially. And so I would like to see us give the approval to the Y that's saying yes. You know, to me, that land out there, it's with the SDCs and it being able to be used for recreation only makes sense. Because if we want to use it for housing, then we have to turn around and replace the SDCs, because we bought it with SDC money, so we've got to return the SDC money. But if it's used for recreation, then we don't necessarily have to do that. So to me, it makes sense to take some property out there, commit it to the YMCA, and say, yes, we are in favor of moving forward with a partnership with you to get a swimming facility built out there, and get that moved forward so that it can move forward. And if that's what the motion is for, and you're willing to adjust the motion that's what's being made, then I think I'm willing to move forward.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, Val, you're saying amend the motion, and the motion would be amended and would result in the following motion, which is to proceed in a partnership with the Y on that piece of property to collaboratively build together a recreation facility that includes a swimming pool that is open, has an open roof at times, and has the $5 restriction added to it at this point in time that is same as the fee to Caveman Pool.
Yes, I would agree with that. So that makes that motion first and second.
I mean, at this point, that is a completely different motion, so are you actually...
I'll withdraw my first motion and make the second motion.
Okay. Did you still have a question, Aaron? Or something to add?
Yeah, because SDCs were mentioned a number of times. We do believe that some of the SDCs may not need to be provided back as a refund to the city to make the city whole. Likely the open space around the Y could potentially be used because it would be a city facility, but it's for city and as defined by city. So the structure itself and the footprint of the structure would likely have to reimburse the SDC fee value of that land. So there's going to be some additional financial impact in it just being free, if that's what city's intent is. Just wanted to put that out there. I know that's way out in advance, but it seemed like there was some traction that, hey, there's no problem with the SDCs, and I want to say that there would likely be some SDC credit, but also some SDC reimbursement back to the city if the full land was provided to the Y.
Understood, Aaron. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure, Kat, whether there was a second to Joel's motion, which, just to clarify, I think was that he's interested in pursuing a partnership with the YMCA regarding property for a swimming pool that would have an open roof at times and a $5 stipulation for city residents that are non-members?
Yeah.
Is that, okay, and is there a second? Okay, I'm not even sure if the YMCA is interested in this since they have not pursued their planning for the pool, but nevertheless, this is where we're at. Rob?
I don't know, I'm sitting here hearing the same things that everyone else has heard, and I never heard the YMCA promise anything about a specific design. They said that they may be able to have a garage door on one side or whatever, and possibly have open air. I can't imagine that they're ready to commit to that today, that are conditions. I mean, what I'm, amenable to or flexible towards or possibly willing to vote yes on is donating the property to the YMCA. They've given us the broad brushstrokes of what they want to do and why they want to do it and why they deserve our support. As far as nailing down the specifics and Joel deciding or the council deciding that they're going to have an open air pool with a removable roof, which they never said today, I can't imagine, especially them not having any, fixed or really accurate estimates on how much that's going to cost. That'd just be foolish for us to vote on that, and it'd be foolish for them to accept it, quite frankly, until they know what exactly the costs are involved with such an endeavor. So, I'm for supporting the YMCA with the land, and us, the city, dealing with any SDC blowback we may have to. As far as the conditions for, the one condition I suppose would be within the YMCA, very easy for them to agree to, would be, the $5 drop-in fee not being raised. Beyond that, I just can't imagine that we're gonna nail down these other details today, and the YMCA would be foolish to accept it at that way,
Aaron has something?
Councilor Pell's, I think, right on track with regards to the motion. At this point, so we're not stuck at a dead end based on some of the specifics with that motion, a great clean motion would be for council to make a motion that staff continue to work with the YMCA on the potential uses of the Allen Creek Road property, and then we'll come back to you with additional details, and we'll continue to do this as a continual workshop item. And keep it relatively general like that. I think that would provide us with the most space for creative thinking and to bring solutions and opportunities back to you.
Vanessa, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure that I'm abundantly clear on the direction that the council is moving towards. It sounds like the partnership, the motion has moved around quite a bit, but it sounds like the partnership is really zoning in on a land donation, and specifically this is for the Allen Creek property. And I just want to be entirely sure that I'm understanding this correctly. When the Allen Creek property was identified originally under our work plan, it was to increase buildable lands for housing. We then entered an agreement with our traffic consultant, which took years to work through ODOT, for a TIA for that area for housing production, and we're now talking about donating that to the YMCA. I just want to be entirely clear on that. Is that the direction that this council is moving in?
Aaron has something to add.
So I could potentially clear that up. Like Councilor Ogier said, that area was listed for definitely housing. That property was always purchased and is in our Parks Master Plan to be future park within the area. I don't think council ever identified that as no longer being park property, but now residential property. So the general area of Allen Creek, the road improvements, the rezoning, all that kind of stuff is correct. That's being designated for future upper development residential. But the Allen Creek property that's owned by the city has always been and maintained in the park infrastructure.
Thank you.
Rick.
So I like some of the comments that Aaron made, that the motion should be very simple and that we're all in agreement to work with the YMCA. And I'm in favor of that. I'm uncomfortable with trying to come up with all the details today. And I realize a lot of that property was purchased for parks. But one of our major needs right now is housing. And part of the motivation for purchasing that large amount of tract of land for parks was to establish soccer fields, which is not really necessary anymore because they've been located at other locations. So if there's the opportunity, I would still like to see some consideration in the future for part of that land be used for housing. So that would be part of my hesitation. Again, I have no problem working with the Y, but feel that I would like to see a discussion on the details at a later date. Thank you.
DJ?
Yeah, I see these as exclusive discussions. YMCA partnership, Caveman Pool. So just to totally clarify that. Through the presentation from YMCA, this is a precedented endeavor. They've done it in other communities with great success, and there's appreciable potential in this community for that partnership, right? Given that this was intended for parkland, I think that it's right up our alley, and I can truly get behind that. However, I'm not in favor of stipulating that agreement on design. Now, a partnership, we could talk about the things that we would like to see and see if we can work on that level, but putting it as far as a stipulated agreement, I don't think that's appropriate at this time. Moving into Caveman, since this is part and parcel to the discussion, however exclusive from the partnership with YMCA, I think that's a real asset to this community and we need to protect it. I'm interested in a general obligation bond that makes sense. However, I think that we need to look into the implications of a decision like that with lending capacity for, or a water treatment plant for a really good example. So I'd like that information to be worked on because I think that's going to help me make that decision. As far as funding sources for that, I don't have the solution. However, we did expand the urban renewal area to include Caveman Pool. We've taken that direction, and I think it's appropriate use of urban renewal monies. I don't think it's a stretch to say that. So I guess very briefly again, I am enticed by the partnership opportunity with YMCA and would vote yes on that. But we still have to talk about Caveman.
Dwayne?
I'd have to agree on the part of just being a clean bill and for the YMCA, and we can discuss all the other things later, and I'm not going to tell the YMCA how to build a pool at the building and pay $5 at this point. I don't think that's the great partnership we start out with. That as a business degree, that's usually not how you start out a partnership. You will do this. That's not. I would like to look forward, and I would agree. This property, we could do many things with them, and I just think that we start this today as a partnership and continue to move forward with them, and for the community also. It's not really us, for the community, and so I would just hopefully make it clean, a clean bill for everything for this motion. Thank you.
Joel, did you have something?
So I'm at step 9 out of 10, and what I hear from my other counselors, they're at step 2 out of 10, which is okay. And so I will withdraw all my other motions that were somewhat unclean. And the new motion, I would ask you to, and I need to have the person that seconded it agree to that they would withdraw that motion.
I agree.
Okay, and then my motion would be that we pursue a partnership with the YMCA for a swimming facility, recreation facility on the recreational land that we have out of Allen Creek, and direct the staff to come back to us with the details of it.
Is there a second? Seconded by Val? Okay, discussion on that motion?
You know, you get 3 strikes.
Rick?
I still would like to see some consideration for housing. I agree with working with the Y, but I think a good discussion on how much acreage we're looking at would be appropriate. Thank you.
Brian?
Just to make sure I'm clear on the motion, is it specifically talking about a partnership with the Y with regards to the Allen Creek property?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Dwayne?
I would agree with some of it. I don't know if they need 9 acres for property, but if I'm leaving it up to staff to tell us how much acreage and stuff they need, or maybe they only need 5 acres and there could be 4 acres of apartments. I don't know, but in my mind, I'm going to leave it up to staff to show us how much they need. And if there's something else we can do with the rest of the property, then I think that's another discussion for another day. 9 acres is pretty large, and unless they're building a giant dome there. So I would let...
Yeah, I think for clarification, just that it was adequately general that we're just interested in pursuing a partnership and that staff would investigate that further, but there's no commitment at this point. Rob?
Well, the word partnership to me The word, donating land or is one thing. A partnership, to me, almost indicates, future obligation of finances of some sort. I mean, we can have a land donation, potentially. That's clean, it's easy for everyone to understand, and there's definite limits to it. A partnership, to me, opens us up to other possibilities in the future, which may be there, but I don't really want to commit to that today, because to me it sounds like financial obligation, especially when they're talking about $65 million. We're talking about ARPA money, and all these things have been thrown around. I mean, I'm perfectly okay with voting to have staff, look at the possibility of a land donation. But for the partnership to potentially be expanded to include more than that, or for us to imply that, or, I'm not comfortable with that at all.
Any further discussion right now? Okay, so the motion on the table was to pursue a partnership with the YMCA regarding a swimming recreational facility on the city's Allen Creek property, and to direct staff to pursue investigating that possibility. Any further discussion, questions? Okay, Joel, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
No.
Rick?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
Val?
Yes.
Motion passed 6-2. Okay, further, I think that probably puts our discussion on the YMCA partnership to rest for today anyway. Is there any further discussion on the caveman pool part of this discussion? DJ?
Well, it seems to me that we're at a point where staff kind of needs further council direction on how they should proceed. I don't want to put them in a waiting pattern. Me as an individual, I think it's a true asset that deserves council attention, and if we're at that point where staff needs direction, then we need to give it to them.
Vanessa?
I would second all of what Councilor Fazer just said, and I would also like some more information on a general obligation bond to fund the project in the future.
Anybody else? Dwayne?
I just reiterate those ARPA dollars need to be spent here, and I don't think there's any way we're going to spend them in the timeline, so I would like to see that, obviously I just said a mid-rogue, so I think they're the ones that requested some money. They're number 2 on the list for some housing, which kind of gives another part of this help that we have on our list of things that we're looking at. So again, I would be okay with giving that part up for now, and we need to hit that timeline and then look into the bond. The bond is something, I don't know how that looks. I never did a bond, so I'm asking for some knowledge on how to do the bond, because no matter what we're going to do, we're going to need the bond. There's a lot of money left over here, or all of it. So that's where I'm putting my cards at, and let's get one project going and continue to move. If this is the caveman pool thing, move out that way. So that's kind of where I'm sitting. Thank you.
All right, I think one question just to ask, it sounds to me like there is general consensus on pursuing caveman pool, so just to make sure we're on that page, Joel is done with it, but it sounds like the rest of you are interested in pursuing something. So some people have been mentioning getting more info on the bond. I think we need to make a decision about that, or whether we want to proceed with what we know so far, or making it fit within the scope of money that we already have, something like that. So let's try to keep our discussion focused on a reasonable next step for Caveman. Rick?
So I would be interested in more information on the bond. Thank you.
Anybody else? Val?
But I think it's a no-brainer, because basically it's putting in the hands of the people how valuable it is to them. So I do agree with the GO bond, looking into what that entails. And I would agree with Dwayne that, the ARPA funding, obviously moving forward, it's not going to move forward fast enough. And so I think that we should look for other areas for that ARPA, but I do believe that we need to look into a GO bond for whatever we decide to do with the Caveman Pool.
Rob?
So I'm not sure if I understand why, maybe it's very clear to other people, but I'm not sure if I understand. Why is it that the progress or commitments or contracts we would enter into for the Caveman Pool wouldn't happen soon enough for ARPA regulations or restrictions? It's, people are saying that's obvious, and I don't see why that's obvious at all. Doesn't it seem like if the money's committed or if there's contracts in place, that the ARPA dollars can be done just because, even though the pool's not going to be finished? I guess that's a question for Aaron or JC.
I guess part of it would be you would want to be spending that ARPA dollar first out of the pot of money that we have. So right now we've got, say, identified ARPA, we've got Urban Renewal Agency, and then potentially a general obligation bond. The general obligation bond being about half of those dollar amounts. If we go ahead and we spend the ARPA dollars on the progression of a pool design and all that kind of stuff, you're spending that money. If the general obligation bond doesn't come through, you spent the money but don't have a finished product. So that would be, I guess, the one caveat with utilizing those ARPA dollars for that, is there some assurances that if we spend the $1 million+ from ARPA, are we going to get that return from the pool, and are we going to fund it? And we wouldn't know that under the current scenario we're talking about until the vote of the general obligation bond has occurred. I don't think we're going to be able to get a vote of the general obligation bond before we need to start spending money, unless we were wanting to, so the general obligation bond and the dollars committed would need to be spent, I think, before we got an answer on the bond, I would think is how the time would go.
Brian?
I do want to hear more information about a general obligation bond, but I'm not entirely convinced that we are going to need a general obligation bond for this. I think the numbers, in my estimation, can be tightened a little bit more. I think there's some other funding sources that, and I brought this up last time too, that have not been brought before council. There's, $500,000 in LB projects that could be, shaken loose and still have projects in there funded. There's items in the urban renewal that are essentially, I guess you could call them dead items or defunct items that those allocations are sitting out there. We haven't put any effort into looking into grants for funding a public municipal pool facility. We haven't done any work on any sort of partnerships or donations with, like Asante or Allcare or other large organizations that might be willing to partner on a project like that, or the YMCA. And so while I do want to hear about the general obligation bond, we all know how bonds and how, asking for money from on the ballot goes. That's why we didn't do it for public safety. That's why we implemented a fee. So, when you say if the people want to pay for it, they'll vote for it, that's not what we did when we implemented the utility fee. So you can't pick and choose when you want to do the arguments that fit what you want to do. So yeah, I'd like to kind of have our next discussion be broader about funding options for the pool, because I think with a mix of sources that we can get there, and maybe there is a very small general obligation bond piece of it, but I don't think it needs to be very significant.
Joel?
So I apologize, but I have a doctor's appointment I need to get to, but I wanted to say one last thing. I don't think we should at this point in time obligate the ARPA dollars to a project that is going to spend that much money for a 70-day season. And I don't think it's prudent, especially given the financial condition of the city. And I know people, there's about 100 people a day that use it right now. On the Parks Committee, we had a couple of the members that were working at the pool, and they felt the same way. So I'm against, I would like to free up the ARPA dollars now and use them prudently, just because I think we need to recognize reality. And with that, I'll trust your judgment.
All right, thank you. Well, given that we're not having an ARPA discussion today, I think that we can just agree that we're interested in hearing more about Caveman Pool costs and funding sources, and put that on an agenda very quickly here, because we have keep hitting delays on this project that is costing us more and more money if we do indeed pursue it. Did you have something different, DJ?
Just generally mentioning, I'm willing to talk about all financial avenues. I think council was explicit about an obligation bond, but I think that it's worthy to have the homework done to look into other avenues that Brian had mentioned as well, just to have that no holds barred, full-fledged discussion, because there's contention on ARPA and obligation bonds and stuff. Let's just open the floodgates on any possible sources of funding. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about bond options and review the costs. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on the July 1st agenda, because we have been delayed a little here, and I don't want the YMCA to be any part of the next discussion, because we've given direction on that project for now. Anything further, Brian?
Yeah, I keep hearing a point brought up about Caveman Pool, about how it's a 70-day-a-year facility, and I think that a lot of people have forgotten that in the discussions about getting a new pool, there has been the discussions of not having it be a 70-day facility anymore, to extend the season into the spring and into the fall to some amount. So I don't know how that discussion fits into the larger Caveman Pool discussion, but obviously the more days you're running the pool, the more cost effective it is and the more people you serve. So I just wanted, I guess, to remind people that that is a part of the discussion, and that, you know, it doesn't have to be a 70-day-a-year facility if we don't want it to be. You know, I remember, I don't think this happens anymore, but I know in the past, the high school has used the pool facility during the school year for you know, PE classes or swim lessons or whatever they have used it for. But so there is potential to have a larger season for Caveman Pool than what it is right now. If anyone is envisioning the new Caveman Pool to be anything like the current Caveman Pool, you're going to have to think again.
All right. Anything else on this topic? Okay, let's move on. We have our next discussion has to do with public comment rules and procedures.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor Council. I just have a brief presentation to open up the dialogue for you to have with regards to public comment rules and procedures, to see if you'd like to make any modifications to public comment. So there's a few things I want to highlight here when it comes to the public comment and what we've identified. Under Resolution 21-7050, which was passed in May 19th, 2021, just going to go through so you have a general idea of what it's talking about. Public comment is an opportunity for the public to address council. The way we have it right now and what are in our rules, and I do want to say we're not fully practicing what our rules are, so that's one of the suggestions of potentially being at the end of the meeting is we potentially do that. But currently right now we have on the books that public comment cards need to be picked up and provided in advance of the meeting, or at the very beginning of the meeting. That public comment period would be limited to no more than 30 minutes. So if there's 50 people there and everyone's taking 3 minutes, you would need to adjust the time frame that they would provide public comment. So you're taking no more than 30 minutes per business meeting. The mayor or chair will call on citizens during the public comment. Individuals will be given 3 minutes, as it states currently right now. If there are more than 10 citizens requesting to speak, individuals will be given 2 minutes to speak. We also have added that council may ask 2 questions of every citizen during public comment. Citizens will be given 1 minute to respond. Also, at the beginning of the meeting, this is something you're very familiar with, so I don't think I'll read it because you hear it every meeting. The mayor does a good job of stating basically what the guidelines are for public comment at the meetings. Call to action is at council's discretion. This is just an item that was brought up during our mayor, council president, and city manager meeting and was discussed in general with some of the other council members, just to review what our current rules are. Alternatives is to facilitate public comment according to council rules and require the comment cards, and those that filled those out would be the only ones that would be able to speak during public comment time, modify current rules based on council direction or practice, and or move to an additional workshop. And there has been some discussion from the council level on 2 minutes and going from 3 minutes to 2 minutes as a customary practice.
Looks like DJ, question?
Is there a problem that needs to be solved, or is this just kind of a reminder on the rules for public speaking that we have for business meeting? And Sarah, if you know more, please, this isn't just for staff, this is...
Yeah, a little of both. I guess one is that we're seeing kind of an increased, an increasing number of interactions that don't have to do with city business. And so, and I have been fairly lenient on the blue card, typically allowing people who turn in the blue card to go first and then allow other people to speak afterwards. So if on the blue card, it does state the rules, first of all, and require them to add what they would like to speak about. So theoretically, we could do some screening of people who have a topic that's not related to city business, and not make them wait throughout the whole meeting, in order to learn that their topic isn't relative to city business. If I do a better job enforcing the blue card rule, I think the other idea is just whether there's council interest in doing 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes, because we do find, and that would be theoretically throughout the meeting, not just limited to the open public comment time, but also to the, to the comments during an agenda item, because sometimes people feel either the need or the desire to fill the 3rd minute, when they've already said what they needed to say and they just start repeating. So I guess those would be kind of the 2 main topics there. Dwayne.
Sorry, I just had a question and I just picked this up. It's the first time I read it in my life, honestly. Should have probably read it before this, but I never had to fill one out. So I think confusion, some people have asked me about this, so I don't know what the rules are. Public period is an opportunity for public to address the council on items not related to public hearing or council items. And I think the confusion is some people, well, that's my First Amendment right to talk about something or anything I want to talk about. It doesn't say that it has to be about the city on here, because they go to the county commissioners meeting and they give them 3 minutes to talk about whatever the hell they want. Sorry, I'm using that word, but it's just, if you watch the meeting or been there, they could just talk about anything. So this doesn't really, I don't think, address that. So maybe there's a confusion, or we need to fix that or something.
I don't know if the next line on that say the intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction.
It says the public comments period is an opportunity for public to address the council on items not related to public hearing or council action items. So that's pretty broad.
Yeah, but then the next sentence?
Public comment cards must be completed, turned in by 5 mayor. It doesn't say anything like that.
Okay, it's missing then. So in the thing that I read every time, which is in
you can pass it over.
In your presentation here, the second line is that the intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction.
There's a card. So I think there's some confusion or something.
So yeah, maybe this needs some additional information about the rules. I mean, we can certainly modify the card, that's not an issue, but
I
yeah.
just picked that up. You saw me walk over there and grab it. I didn't never even seen the card. I just always listened to you talk.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it is something that I say every single time, you know, and the intent is to provide information pertinent to the city's jurisdiction, you know, and if you need to have an issue with a staff member, to go see the council, the city manager rather, so. But yeah, that's not on the card. DJ?
Can I comment, or are we just clarifying?
I think, yeah, I don't think we have a lot of questions, probably. Go ahead.
Sure. So the fact of the matter is this is a courtesy of council. Like, we are not required by any statute whatsoever to provide a general public comment section. And I think it's healthy and generous for us to do so, but we obviously need rules. I think the current rules are fair if they're held to it, and I could support following the rules. I also think that 3 minutes is ample time to deliver any message whatsoever. Doesn't matter how grave or important, 3 minutes is ample. I could make a fair argument for 2 as well. And I'm happy with the discretion on the amount of people and trying to hold the line for 30 minutes. I'm happy to be a little bit wiggly on the rules, but it has been getting a little bit out of control lately. So I think the rules as stated are fine now that we all understand them. I think that that's probably the main benefit of bringing this up today.
So it sounds like you support leaving it at 3?
Yeah, as long as we all have an understanding of what it's for, it's clearly demonstrated to the public, and that we're you know, we might have some growing pains in holding to, you know, the rules that we've set forth.
Rick?
I would be in favor of relooking at limiting it to 2 minutes, and especially when you see there's more than 10 people in the audience and you know that it's going to go beyond the 30 minutes. Thank you.
Valerie, then Dwayne?
Oh, well, I think it's stated in there, that it says right there. I think that we went through this before, and we went 3 minutes is ample time, but when you look out and you have that many people, then you move it to 2 minutes. And I think that is something that is perfectly fine. Because I think the reality of it is we do need to hold it to 30 minutes. I mean, we have lives too, and you hear the same thing over and over and over again, redundant, you get it. So I think we can just do the rules that we have established, that it would solve the issues that we've recently had.
So yes, it would if you'd adhere to all the rules that we have established. That means that the cards would need to be turned in advance, and you will not allow people that have not turned in cards in advance of public comment to provide public comment. Therefore, you can regulate the amount of public comment, and you recognize whether or not you need to change that from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. Without that in place, it's going to be very difficult to regulate, oh, we're going over 30 minutes now because 10 other people also wanted to provide comment.
Just want to clarify too. I mean, in my opinion, the general public comment period is not the worst offender for the time, and that a lot of times it's the comments during the agenda items. So the 2 or 3 minutes, if you want to limit the comments throughout the meeting to 2 minutes, not just the open public comment time. Dwayne.
My problem with the public comment is we're really lax on people's subject matter sometimes, and other times we're really strict. And we get some people that just want to gab about anything that's not even pertaining to the subject matter. I mean, even in the a certain thing topic, they're talking about something weird, and we don't cut them off, and then, sorry, I just spilled water, and then public comment, we cut them off. So I feel like we need to be consistent on all comments. If it doesn't pertain to the subject, excuse me, if it doesn't, let's cut them off. I'm okay with that. But we just be consistent on all things of matter to me, because I know we all look up here and go, what's this got to do with the subject matter? And it's nothing to do with it. We've all go, okay, here we are for so many minutes, hours, whatever it is. I just want to be more consistent and fair. And it's fair for everybody, not just one group or one type of people, all groups. That's just where I'm at with the thing.
Rob.
Yeah, there's so many gray areas and so many places to blur the lines. I can remember several years back, Mayor Fowler was running the meeting, and he, tried to cut somebody off who was talking about something, a measure that was on the ballot, and it actually was a county ordinance, but it affected everyone in the city as well. And so then he cut this person off. He didn't happen to like that person at all. He cut him off, when in fact that particular issue did affect everyone in the city, even though it was a county-wide measure. So, it's such a gray area, like what affects the city, what doesn't? Well, what exactly should people be allowed to talk about, what shouldn't they be? I'm probably more in favor of reducing the time and rather than having to police every word of the subject matter that someone feels applies to our city. So, it's, you've got a situation where, 10 people get cards and, 10 of them got in the room and didn't know there was a card. We know that's going to happen, and then they're going to be upset, Or we had, 10 people and then 2 more people get inspired to speak. We know that's going to happen. And so then we can't retroactively go back and say, okay, we're going to limit everyone to 2 minutes. We've already started at 3 minutes. So, we know that these things these problems are going to come up, whether, again, it's people who get inspired, people who don't know about the card, the mayor having to decide what applies to the city, what doesn't apply to the city. I mean, I would just as soon reduce the amount of time and go with it apply it as well as we can.
Dwayne.
I think I'd be okay with that too, if we just did 2 minutes and they could speak about whatever under the sky of blue, but you just have to be fair, you know what I'm saying? I feel like maybe it's too hard to pick and choose what topic it is. You go to the county commissioner, they could talk for their 3 minutes about anything in the world. And it has happened over there. I've listened online and gone there. I just think that if we limit it to 30 minutes, we do it fairly, and hey, this is your time or whatever, or 2 minutes, and it's whatever subject they want, unless they're going to attack people. I don't think, I could personally think we don't need to sit here and people yell at one person, you know what I'm saying? But that's just where I'm at. I mean, I just want to be fair with whatever we do.
Vanessa.
I am in support of reducing it from 3 to 2 minutes, and I'm also in support of having a hard line on comments only pertaining to city business.
DJ.
So this might not even be pertinent. I had to. But I hope we're not talking about people that may be applicants of land use decisions or chairs of committees or something that kind of have like a little bit more back and forth or something that's really helping us make a decision. Are we talking about that or just, okay.
No, just
Good.
public comment.
Thanks.
Valerie.
Yeah, I think I could go along with public comment as to what Vanessa said, just 2 minutes and pertaining to business. I can live with that.
All right. Brian.
Yeah, I agree with Val and Vanessa. I'm not sure how I feel about capping it at 30 minutes, but I do agree with the 2 minutes and it pertaining to city business.
Rick.
As I said before, I'm on board with 2 minutes.
Okay, I think I have the majority of you on board to go with 2 minutes, but let's just do a quick raise of hands to see who was supportive of 2 minutes. Okay, all of you. Okay. So we'll change that to be 2 minutes. And do a better job, I think, enforcing, having people fill this out. I think or I guess here's the question. If we want to stick to city business, we do need to have them fill it out so that we can kind of sift through. It helps, they do have to write on here their subject, and sometimes it's not clear, it's like parks. But, Karen and Aaron or whoever's helping interface before the meeting and, can help people, elaborate, what do you mean if they want to talk about Tom Pierce Park, it's not city business, right? If it's a city park issue, then it's city business. We can do a better job with the form, but if you want to allow, really people able to talk on any topic, then we probably don't even need the form. So let's just do a quick show of hands for city business. Okay, question first.
So does that mean that we're going to enforce that only people who have filled out a card get to speak? Or, in other words, do people have to fill out a card to be able to speak?
I
'Cause
mean,
right now, we don't do that.
Yes, we have and we haven't. Basically, a lot of people have been filling out blue cards, and I have them go first. The last meeting, none of the people had, which was kind of unusual. But for the most part, many of them do or could, right, if they had been encouraged to fill it out. So, yeah, I personally find it's a good way to help filter whether or not it's city business without making them sit through a 3-hour meeting only to be told that the thing that they're trying to talk about has nothing to do with the city, right? And if it's clearly the irrigation district, or they want to talk about the president, or, you know, something like that, we can tell them at the time they fill out the card, hey, sorry, you know, this isn't city business, rather than having to interrupt them, which is extremely, you know, awkward. Valerie.
I would just like to say that, have that put on that card. I think that might be something
Yes.
that's just very clear. And maybe even put it on in bold, city business. Just, I think that's important.
So I'm hearing this, and one of the things that I see taking on a risk from a staff perspective is us doing an initial screening with blue cards, which I'm somewhat okay with, but we would be doing a screening, and I would imagine we could be getting some comments about us filtering information to council, because we're saying that that's not city business. The problem with the city business issue, which municipalities and local governments struggle with in general, those that enforce it, and many don't. Like you mentioned, we see many municipalities and local governments that don't do that, is the subjectivity of filtering the business. You can have someone come up and talk about abortion, and you could say, we don't have any control over abortion. But from a standpoint, they could say, hey, but I want the city to take a political stance, and so will you please do this proclamation, or would you do something along those lines? So technically, is that city business? Maybe. And so it all is in the way it's presented, et cetera. So then you get into a subjectivity where you're putting the mayor and or a staff member, and I'm not trying to make a case for one or the other. I'm just trying to address one thing that hasn't really been discussed today that we saw, and we talked about briefly at our council president meeting, was the escalation of energy that occurred because the mayor was trying to abide by our rules and saying, hey, this isn't city business. Can you please speak to city business? The individuals doubled down and increased their energy. The mayor needed to try to, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the, so we're not in a de-escalation mode. And so that was a concern. How do you address that when you're trying to enforce subject matter that is somewhat subjective is a difficult thing. So some of the things that you're talking about, I think, will make public comment run smoother. But there's still that issue of escalating energy instead of de-escalating when someone, whether it's the mayor or city staff, is put in a position to demonstrate and dictate what is city business and not.
DJ.
So another benefit, I think, to this is getting council aware of what we're dealing with and provide official support for that discretion when subjectivity arises. But also, I think we can deal with this in a good manner by saying the most effective way to contact your city council and mayor is by emailing us at mayor council. That is the hands down the most effective way to get our attention on something. Put it on the paper, put it in the words beforehand or something, and I think that's really going to help. Hey, you have an important issue that you want a decision making on or council's attention. That's the best way to do it.
Rob.
Yeah, I think Aaron makes a really good point. I tried to make that point earlier with the example of the county ballot measure that someone was talking about, and then the mayor at the time didn't see the relevance to a city meeting, but it was a county-wide measure, and that person got shut down. So that was, I would think, pretty clearly a mistake on that particular mayor's part. But he, Aaron mentions other areas that are, we'll say, less black and white or more gray. So again, how you define exactly what city business is is very, very tough. And to me, reducing the amount of time gets us 1/3 of the way there anyway, because if it's not right, at least it's not as long, you know?
Fair enough. Brian?
Yeah, I think there's a huge gray area there, and it's somewhat objective what's city business or not. And any one of us in the mayor's position would not get it right 100% of the time. It's just impossible to do. And I think, at least in what I've observed, the mayor has done their best to be as neutral as possible in enforcing that. And that, you know, sometimes she's probably not going to get it totally right, just like anyone else would. I don't think it's prudent to put that filtering on staff. If staff is getting the card and they see that it may not pertain to city business, they could just reiterate to the person that, you know, it needs to pertain to city business, and then that can be all they have to do. They don't have to do the filtering per se, but just to kind of reinforce that. And then I think you've been doing a fine job, and I know it's not easy to shut people down. I'm glad I'm not the person that has to do that, and I know you don't enjoy it, but I'm fine with you being that arbiter, given the experience that you've shown.
All right. Well, I think, is everybody okay with us putting on the form that the intent is to provide information relevant to city business? And then I think that is your intent, right? To have, to be available to the public if they want to contact you on something relevant to the city, and not to just come here and talk about, you know, the birds and the bees or something, you know, totally random. So, okay. We'll make some adjustments to the form. It sounds like you're supportive of reducing it to 2 minutes, and we'll update that on the form as well, and try to be a little bit more clear here on the form about our rules. I guess one thing that is on this form currently right now is that it says if more than 2 people are speaking on one topic, those individuals will be asked to select a spokesperson, and that individual will be provided 5 minutes to speak. And personally, I find that incredibly uncomfortable, because if they were here as an organized group, I think that might make sense if they were a part of a club or something. But for the most part, people who are here to talk about the same topic might not know each other, right? And how are they going to stand outside and quickly pick a spokesperson? So are we okay with just scratching that from the rules? Dwayne?
I think so, but like we've had Mitt here talk on the homeless thing or something. There's like 20 of them here. I would say we can probably narrow that down some. There's been a couple times that we've done several from that group of associated with that topic, and that's kind of difficult because they're all kind of saying the same thing. Obviously, they're, well, I hope they're saying the same thing. I think that's the only reason for that rule, is because when you get the whole Mitt group here, or not, I'm not trying to pick on them, I'm just saying that's.
It is. I'll just tell you from my perspective, I have no way of knowing, you know, as they're coming forward, whether they have ever met each other before, whether they're board members, whether it was an organized effort, whether 50 people just happen to be mad about the same thing. And so
maybe we just say that.
And so, you know, I think the idea here is good, that if there were, you know, a whole bunch of people from one group, you'd give them 5 minutes instead of listening to them all repeat the same things. But I literally don't know how to enforce that policy. Well, Val?
I would agree that's too difficult on the stance, on the dais, to have any idea about that, because you can't say, oh, you 3 over there are going to talk about, go out and decide which of you is going to speak, because you don't know exactly what they're going to say. I think the means of that one, and I actually went to, when I was in Austin once, went to City Hall, and they had all of their blue sheets turned in ahead of time. And in that case, it made sense, because you might, as a group, talk to people and you all want to talk, where if 3 people were to say, hey, we're going to have this person speak for us, but that would have to be arranged ahead of time. So I think under the way that we do it, we just take that out, personally. That would be my.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that we've reduced it to 2 minutes kind of already mitigates that to some degree, so I'm okay with removing that.
Okay, sounds like we're good with scratching that line. Okay, I think unless anybody has something else to say about comment, we can move on. Aaron?
Yeah, can I get some additional direction on the A here on this section? Public comment cards can be picked up in advance of the meeting, and public comment cards can be received up to the public comment section of the meeting. That infers that if you want to speak during public comment, a comment card is required. So would you like us to, because we're going to need to draft a resolution for your approval based on the changes that we've talked about today. Do you want us to address this to be more of an encourage and not a requirement? Or do you want to have the blue card submitted up to public comment and have that held true? Or would you like to change that clause?
DJ?
Just first come, first serve, 30 minutes, that's all you get. You turned it in early, good, you get to go first. You know, there you go. Capped at 30 minutes, and if you get the 26th person, is theoretically is not going to be able to speak that evening. That's.
However, if you only have 3 people, and it's not necessarily linked to time, it's more linked to process of, because there's some cities that people have to make a reservation, and cities have okay, public comment is from this time to you have, and you've got 3 minutes, and they just separate them out and it's done. So it could be as rigid as that. So I'm just asking, do you want to require the blue cards or not? And if you say no, it can be anybody who's in the audience, and we may need to look at saying, hey, blue cards are encouraged, but not required. The way this reads, it sounds like it's a requirement.
Well, I think we are doing the blue cards. I think the question maybe is whether what it says right now, and not everybody might know this, but it says that they have to be turned in by 5:50 prior to the meeting. So, and I've been allowing people to do it up until public comment essentially. So do you want them to do it prior to the meeting or up until public comment begins, I think is the question.
Okay.
Rick?
I like up until public comment.
Yep, I do too.
Okay, we'll do it up until public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Are we going to keep the 30-minute limit that we haven't been using?
Up to you all. I'll just remind you that this is, the 30 minutes is only for, and you're right, we have not been doing it, but it's actually only for topics that are not on the agenda. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that that's where we've seen the biggest crowds, you know, have usually been related to an agenda item. And so then it wouldn't apply unless you wanted to make a rule about public comment regarding agenda items.
Well, it doesn't happen very often, but I would just think that if we're going to have it on the books for that, we should enforce it. And if we're not going to enforce it, we should take it off. Yeah. So I don't know where council stands, but.
If it's not utilized, it could be on the books and you're not utilizing it because it's not necessary. But those times where it may be necessary to use, you'll still have it as a tool. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not sure I've seen a huge abuse of time during the open public comment. I have. Well, in terms of large crowds, I think they've mostly been related to things that are on the agenda. Yeah. Okay, that helps. We can make more changes as we go if needed. I think, anything else on that topic before we move on? Okay, I think we're ready for a, well, I guess let's just keep agenda review real quick. We have a meeting this week. So we have public hearings regarding a resolution on state revenue sharing and an ordinance for a property line vacation at 63 and 59 Southeast Demi Court. The council action items are for a resolution awarding ARPA funds to home bridging, a resolution regarding levying taxes, a resolution regarding adopting the 24-25 budget, a resolution awarding Joni Anderson a URA building rehab grant, A resolution, and then council consent calendar items are resolution for the interfund loan to Bancroft Fund, a resolution for the Josephine County Assessor delinquent sewer charges, a resolution regarding tax receipts, a resolution regarding awarding a street sewer replacement, resolution authorizing a contract with SAIF, a motion to acknowledge the monthly investment report, a motion to approve the middle housing findings of fact, a motion regarding the home bridging scenic cottages comprehensive plan map and zoning map amendment findings of fact, a motion regarding the scenic cottages findings of fact, and then a URA public hearing to adopt the Urban Renewal Agency budget, and a resolution regarding URA tax receipts, and then appointing one member to the Urban Tree Advisory Committee. Are there any things you wanted pulled off consent calendar? Any questions about Wednesday's agenda?
I have a question. Yeah, I just have a question, and this was something that kind of we talked a little bit about with the URA. No, it's not the URA. It's the ARPA funding for home bridging, and the whether something was in the urban renewal. I know you sent something out to us. So, Aaron, do you want to refer to that, what was discussed?
I can. Okay. I think you're referring probably to the council memo 23-2024, where there was a request for council to consider the funding of two projects. One is a Mid-Rogue Foundation proposal, and then also home bridging, where home bridging currently right now is utilizing some ARPA dollars. I think it's around 700-something thousand. And where there was another project that was proposed by Mid-Rogue Foundation that was not receiving funds, but is eligible for those type of funds and was still ranked as in a criteria of meeting your criteria for affordable housing. The concept is that we change the ARPA dollars that were allocated to the home bridging project to Urban Renewal Agency dollars under our affordable housing project that we have and housing that we have, and then transfer the ARPA dollars to Mid-Rogue Foundation. And the reason for this swap is Mid-Rogue Foundation's proposal is outside the Urban Renewal Agency, where home bridging is inside the Urban Renewal Agency, so it's an allowable use there. If you utilized urban renewal dollars for home bridging, then it would free up the allocation of ARPA dollars for Mid-Rogue Foundation. I think I got it. And so that's what it was. But if you were to want to do that, then you would likely want to table your item that is up for action today, not today, but June 5th, when it comes to the council action resolution awarding ARPA funds to home bridging. You'd want to push that to the next business meeting on the 19th. Staff would, if this was the council direction wanted, staff would then need to develop some action items for you to also have on the 19th to do the allocation of ARPA dollars, and urban renewal dollars for the other projects. So can we make it work? I think we can, but it wouldn't be at the June 5th meeting.
Did you talk at all with home bridging about that?
I'll refer that to Bradley to see if he has any comments with regards to that.
I know that Mark Trinidad has had a couple of conversations, but I can't tell you for 100% certain that specific proposal that Aaron just laid out was given to him, but he's aware that the memo, the council memo was sent to the council, and so I think we were waiting to see today if council wanted to give direction, then we would let him know for certain. So I apologize. He may or may not have been given I know he got the memo though.
Okay, and I would just like to say that I would propose that we did that, and the reason is I think 2 weeks is not going to make that big difference as to whether something moves forward in terms of home bridging or not. And I would just like to see more housing and more opportunity to get more housing as soon as possible.
Dwayne?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is they want you to take that for scenic, which that money has already been allocated for scenic for that is not for what we'll be voting on the 5th, and that's in the Fruitdale area, which is not in the area, so that does not work.
Have a packet here.
Council, are you referring to the?
We're voting on Wednesday for Fruitdale, not Scenic, and that memo is for Scenic, and that money has already been allocated to the Scenic project. We already voted on that. So this is like a moot point when it comes to pushing it out 2 weeks because they're two different projects, and the Fruitdale project does not work for what they requested, so that can't happen.
Yeah, I think that's correct. That the item on Wednesday night's agenda is for the home bridging project on Fruitdale Drive, and so that wouldn't be involved in this URA ARPA dollar swap, right?
That is correct. I think the issue is that you would be, if you voted on Wednesday night to approve the Fruitdale cottages, you would at that point be allocating 100% of the ARPA money. Because that, and so to postpone it to the 19th would just allow for that flexibility. Doesn't mean that the Fruitdale conversation wouldn't continue. It just means that you would, if you do decide to reverse your decision on the Scenic cottages, then you have the opportunity to talk about all of the ARPA funding together on the 19th rather than having already allocated 100% of the ARPA money. So I think that was the kind of the reason behind it.
Valerie?
So in clarification, and that's also CC'd under there, so basically that puts a hold on the home bridging Scenic cottages comp plan amendment? No, because that's
No.
totally different. But it does allow for the Scenic for all of them to be looked at, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess just to move this along, Council, do you want to move this item to the 19th, or do you want to leave it on the 5th for now? Vanessa?
Yes, to move it from the 5th to the 19th.
Okay. Council generally supporting moving it to the 19th?
No, they've been waiting for over some time now for this approval, and now all of a sudden you're going to move that on them because I'm just telling you that the city we are pushing people's projects out so long. You know, just like we told them in Scenic, it's going to take 4 months. It took 7 months almost, or 6.5 months to get some adjustments, and we keep doing this to these builders. And I had this conversation with Aaron on Friday, is the city's causing builders to be expanding their projects further out because of us, the city, and now we're gonna do it again. They already went through the process. We put it out there. They said they were number one, and now we're gonna tell them, no, well, we have a change of plan because we don't like the process. I think that's wrong.
Valerie, did you want to delay it?
I would, because I don't think 2 weeks is going to make a big difference if we can approve all 3 of them in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, Rob, did you want to delay it?
2 weeks, right.
I think Vanessa said yes. Rick?
That's a hard one. I could go both sides. Thank you.
Okay. DJ?
No, I'm not in favor of delaying. I think it's presumptive to say that 2 weeks is no big deal in their greater scheme, and Dwayne is absolutely correct in what he said about timing.
Okay, Brian?
2 weeks isn't a long time. I'm fine with that.
Okay, it sounds like, if I can read, four of you were interested in postponing it to the 19th, so let's go ahead and postpone it to the 19th.
Mayor,
Okay, yes.
can I also add a potential suggested change for the 5th? Can we also move the Urban Renewal Agency public hearing, council action, and consent to the 19th also? We want to make sure that we're abiding by public meeting law when it comes to advertising, and that would ensure that if we do that on the 19th for the Urban Renewal Agency.
Okay. So that's going to the 19th as well. Okay. Anything further regarding Wednesday? All right. And then our next workshop will be on the 17th, talking about city surplus properties as well as land use public notice radius of notifying neighbors about land use issues. Is there anything that's not currently on the agenda that somebody wants to get on the agenda? Valerie?
Yes, I've been meeting with some people about public safety. We continued a little bit of the discussion further out than we originally had. And there's one thing I think that's come out of that is that I would really like to see, and this group would really like to see, the creation of a police fire support or public safety advocacy committee to kind of continue the discussions and having some people on there. And so I'd like to just get it moved to agenda so that we could talk about creating that committee and who would be on that committee and that sort of thing. So I would just like to see that put on a future agenda, workshop agenda, to have a discussion about creating a public safety advocacy committee.
Okay. All right, and then just one more item to highlight, because it's a little out of sequence with our normal meetings, is that July 12th, we have a URA workshop scheduled, and I think, was that a Friday? Yeah, that's a Friday. So that would be a long kind of strategic planning session for urban renewal agencies, so just make sure to note that on your calendars. All right, I think it's time to move on to our executive session. So
I make a motion to close the regular session and open a executive session.
Thanks. Is there a second? Seconded by Vanessa. All in favor of adjourning the regular session, moving into executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. In that case, the council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of discussing those subjects previously noticed for this executive session, which are both labor negotiations and real property transaction negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 and more specifically under the subsections of that statute which have been publicly noticed for this meeting. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically requested not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session, welcome the audience back into the room. And we need to turn off that TV camera.